Good morning, everyone. I'm Eric Barassa with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. Welcome to the Boston Region Metropolitan Planning Organization meeting. David Moeller is going to be joining us around 10:30, so I will be chairing this meeting until he joins us. Can I read the accessibility statement or the notice of non-discrimination? You are invited to participate in our transportation planning process, regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status, or background. Guidelines for this virtual meeting. All participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. After the roll call, board members may mute and unmute themselves. Always remain muted unless actively speaking. To participate in the discussion, please select the raised hand function. Find this by clicking either on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and a window will pop up with a raised hand button at the bottom, or the reactions button in the toolbar. The chair will then call on participants. If you're on the phone, you can use the *9 function to raise your hand. If you have any technical difficulties, please contact Sean Rourke via the chat box or at srouke@ctps.org, or you can call him at 857-702-3693. Accessibility statement. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards and revised Section 508 standards. Again, if you require any additional accommodation in order to participate fully in this meeting, please contact Sean Rourke, MPO staff at srouke@ctps.org, or call him at 857-702-3693. Okay, let's do introductions. Let's see, who is calling the roll? Is that Aaron or Judy?
That's me. I'll be kicking that off.
Great, Judy.
All right, so we don't have David Moeller, so I'll go to Mass DOT seat 2.
Is that John?
John Romano here.
Oh, I think we were
Sorry.
looking for John Bouchard if he's here.
Well, I was trying to unmute, and you were unmuting me at the same time. My apologies. John Bouchard, representing Highway Administrator Jonathan Gulliver, present.
Thank you. Mass DOT Highway, John Romano, I did hear you.
Okay, sorry, I spoke out of turn.
No, that's okay. MBTA.
Good morning, this is Allie Clayman representing General Manager Eng and the MBTA.
We heard from Massport that Sarah Lee won't be here. MAPC.
Good morning, Eric Barassa with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council.
MBTA Advisory Board.
Morning, Brian Kane, MBTA Advisory Board present.
Advisory Council.
Leonard Diggins, Advisory Council here. Thank you.
City of Boston BTD.
I do not see Matt Moran yet.
Okay. City of Boston BPDA.
Good morning, Joe Blankenship, BPDA alternate representing Mayor Wu in the city of Boston. Jim Fitzgerald will be here at 10:30 or so, and Matt Moran will not be able to join today.
Great, thank you. At-large city of Everett.
Eric Molinari, representing Mayor DeMaria in the city of Everett, sitting in for Jay Monty.
Great. At-large city of Newton.
Good morning, David Kozis representing Mayor Ruth Ann Fuller in the city of Newton.
At-large town of Arlington.
I do not see Claire Rigger.
At-large town of Brookline.
Good morning, Rob King, representing Town of Brookline and Town Administrator Charles Carey.
Intercorps Committee, City of Somerville.
Good morning, Tom Bent, City of Somerville, representing Mayor Katiana Ballantyne in the Intercorps.
Minuteman Advisory Group on Interlocal Coordination, Town of Acton.
Good morning, Kristen Guichard, representing the Magic Subregion for the Acton Select Board Member Jean Charter.
Metro West Regional Collaborative, City of Framingham.
I do not see Dennis Giambetti yet.
Great, thank you. North Shore Task Force, City of Beverly.
Dylan Luke is representing Mayor Mike Cahill and as an alternate for Darlene.
North Suburban Planning Council, Town of Burlington.
Do not see Melissa Tintopoulos.
Okay. South Shore Coalition, Town of Hull.
I also do not see anyone from Hull.
Okay. Southwest Advisory Planning Committee, Town of Medway.
No Peter Pelletier yet.
All right, and Three Rivers Interlocal Council, Town of Norwood, Neponset River Regional Chamber.
Steve Olenoff representing the Trick Subregion.
In our ex officio members, Federal Highway Administration.
I do not see anyone from FHWA.
Okay, in Federal Transit Administration.
Also no one from FTA.
All right, thank you. That calls the roll.
Okay, thank you. We will skip the chair's report and we will go to the executive director's report. Tegan.
Thanks, Eric, and it's great to see everyone again. I will keep my report again relatively brief today, and first just offer a few reminders. I mentioned these last time, but wanted to remind you again that there is engagement ongoing related to our coordinated human services plan work. So first, we still have an active survey to gather information about needs and priorities for human services transportation. And our target audience for that survey are both transportation providers and users of that service. So we will share a link again in the chat and ask you to help us spread the word. And then again, the workshop that I had also previously mentioned is coming up next week, April 27th at 9:30 a.m. So if you are associated with or are in contact with councils on aging, disability commissions, transit providers, and any other human service transportation providers, please join us at this workshop to discuss strategies, again, for improving the coordination and delivery of those services. So your contact around the Human Services Plan and these engagement activities is Stella Jordan, our Public Engagement Program Manager at sjordan@ctps.org. So please contact her if you are interested in participating in the workshop or have other questions. So with that, we'll just touch on today's agenda. There are a number of action items that we are asking you to make a vote on. So thank you for your attendance today. We will have a work scope. We will have an amendment 1 for the federal fiscal year 23 UPWP. We will ask you to vote to endorse that after the 14-day public review period. We also have a vote. We are asking you to vote to release for the 21-day public review period the federal fiscal year 2024 to 28 TIP document that we've been talking about extensively these last several meetings. And then we will also ask the board to make a decision on the list of projects and program funding allocations that would be included in the new long-range transportation plan. So those are our voting items. And then we will also have a presentation that was delayed from last week. It will be an update on the capital investment plan by Mass DOT and the MBTA. And they will present on the selection process for highway and transit projects in the state CIP, which is inclusive of all the funding sources for the state. Next slide. So just as a reminder, next month in May, we would return to the normal first and third meeting dates for MPO board meetings. However, we may have a light enough agenda. We may cancel the May 4th meeting, but please don't count on that yet. We will reach out and confirm that sometime after this meeting. But we just wanted to give you the heads up that that may happen. And then next week, which is April 27th, we will not have an MPO meeting, but we do have a longer A&F committee meeting from 10 a.m. to 11:30. And then I also just wanted to remind folks that those A&F committee meetings, primarily to talk about the operations plan, will continue in May. Even if we don't have MPO board meetings on the 4th, we will likely still meet on that day. And we are working towards finalizing the full draft of the MPO's first operations plan. And then just a reminder that today, this may come up in the committee reports, but there is a UPWP meeting after this meeting at 1 o'clock. And that is it. if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions for Tegan? Okay, not seeing any. Let's move on to public comments. Are there any public comments? And folks can either go now, or if anything comes up during the course of the meeting, folks can also raise their hands. So let's see, I see a few. I'll go with Ed Nardi first.
Good morning, all. My name is Ed Nardi. I live in Concord, Massachusetts. However, I own a commercial piece of land, 9 acres in Lexington, at the foot of the jug handle on Hartwell Ave and 4 and 225. And previously, we did not enjoy very favorable zoning to do anything of significance there. However, with Lexington passing the MPPA zoning or housing law a week and a half ago, it's opened up a possibility for a reasonably dense multifamily project. Of course, there's a long way to go with that as well, but certainly that is a very positive step for certainly Lexington and the broader community. That said, in order for it to work well, you know, there's got to be safe passage for pedestrians, bicyclists, etc., across that intersection and that section of Bedford Street as a whole. And certainly in today's world, that doesn't exist. You know, we all envision a stronger live, work, play environment, but for people to take advantage of the amenities, retail, significant work opportunities on Hartwell Ave on the south side of Bedford Street, perhaps future residents and the existing community need safe passage across that, not only to gain access to work, retail, existing retail, as well as future retail on future developments, but access to the Minuteman Bikeway for not only commuting, but for recreation as well. So that I would urge that the MPO continue to support this project by keeping it on the Destination 2050 Long Range Plan and in the FFY 229-2033 funding phase, and then later as it moves through the TIP process. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your comment, Mr. Nardi. I'm going to now move to Sheila Page.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me and us today. Last week, you heard from Michelle Sicolo, our Lexington's representative, and Jim Malloy, the Lexington town manager. This week, the planning board chair wanted to come, but he got called away at the last minute. But you've heard a lot about this project and the importance of the project. Lexington has been working hard to transform this 1960s business park into a truly vibrant district. In 2020, we increased the density with added height and reduced setbacks. We modernized our uses, and then in 2023, we added multifamily zoning. With each step of this transformation, it's been really critical to be able to point to the long-range transportation plan and say, you know, the last piece of the puzzle is fixing the transportation issues in the region. And so that's been just very helpful to be able to say that, but we're not just saying it. We've been working on it. The town has invested almost $13 million. We have developers who have invested in this corridor, and they are also counting on this transportation project. So it's critical for us that it remains on the long range transportation plan as we continue to work to develop this district. So I suggest perhaps that the MPO consider keeping us and Framingham, I believe Framingham is in a similar position, keeping us on the long range plan now, and then rolling out your new policy that was developed in 2020 as new projects come in. So that would be my ask, is to keep us on. We plan to move to the TIP on, let's see, FYY 25. I think we'll be ready. We're finishing up the 25% design now. So thank you for that consideration and appreciate your time.
Thank you, Sheila. I'm going to move to Chris Carr.
Ready? Good morning. This is not Chris Carr. This is Rick DeAngelis. Chris Carr and Michael Johnson are with me, and we are from Boston Properties, a noted real estate owner, developer, and operator in Massachusetts, and in particular in the Boston region, including the town of Lexington. We have been in Lexington since the early 1980s and have seen various iterations of a long-range transportation plan. We are here today to fully endorse and support that the long-range transportation plan remain active, and that you, in your wisdom and judgment, move it forward as quickly as possible. I also speak personally as a Lexington resident for probably 45 years, and as the chair of Lexington's Economic Development Advisory Committee that advises the select board and the town manager on matters of economic development. And we believe, as an Economic Development Advisory Committee, that this transportation plan is vital to the completion of the program which Sheila Page has so eloquently described for you. So Boston Properties, in sum, is in full support of the transportation plan, as is the Economic Development Advisory Committee. And we have submitted a letter to that effect on behalf of Boston Properties. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Appreciate it. And now I will go to Terry Ford.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Terry Ford, and I am also joining this morning in support of the Route 4 225 Bedford and Hartwell Avenue major infrastructure project remaining on the MPO's long-range plan. I am the Director of Development for Greatland Realty Partners. Greatland is a local life sciences developer and a very large landowner along Hartwell Ave. We currently own 12, 24, 25, 40 Hartwell and 10 McGuire around the corner. And we have also, along with Boston Properties, worked closely with Lexington over the years on our redevelopment plans for this area, and continue to have a great relationship with both Lexington and MassDOT. And we're very appreciative of all the work that they've done so far on this plan, and feel strongly that the infrastructure is imperative to the success of our future development plans along Hartwell. So like I said in the beginning, I'm joining in support of this plan remaining on the long range plan destination 2040. And hopefully that we can sort of realize all the work that Sheila and others have put in to date. Thanks.
Great. Thank you very much. Don't think I see any other public comments. And again, if during the course of the meeting today, any members of the public would like to make a comment, please raise your hand and Chair will call you after MPO members have had a chance. So let's move to committee chairs reports. Derek Cravat.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to let everybody know that the Unified Planning Work Program Committee will be meeting this afternoon at 1 p.m. As Tegan mentioned in her report as well. So just wanted to give members a reminder, just say all are welcome to attend. We'll be discussing a set of scenarios that staff have developed to look at potential studies to fund within the 2024 Unified Planning Work Program. So see you all then. Thank you.
Any other committee chairs reports? Not seeing any. We will move to the Regional Transportation Advisory Council report. Len Diggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There is no report from the Advisory Council today. Thank you.
Okay, that was quick. Let's move to our first action item. Can I have a motion to approve the March 16th MPO meeting minutes? Brian Kane.
So moved, Mr. Chair, and I regret that I cannot second your motion today, but I'm happy to make it in your place.
Thank you. Tom Bent.
Good morning. I will second that motion.
Wonderful. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Judy, can you call the roll?
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Ally Clayman,
Ally Clayman, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Brian Kane,
Brian Kane, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Joe Blankenship,
Joe Blankenship, yes.
Eric Molinari,
Eric Molinari, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
Rob King,
Rob King, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Kristen Guichard.
I'll abstain as I was not in attendance at the meeting.
Thank you. Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Dylan Lukich,
Dylan Lukich, yes.
and Steve Olenoff.
Steve Olenoff, yes.
Great. Motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Agenda item 8, work scope, fair equity analysis. Emily.
Yes. So, hi, I'm Emily DeMonico, staff to the Boston Region MPO and a transit data analyst at CTPS. Today, I'm here to present the work program for a project called MBTA Fare Equity Analysis for Low-Income Fares and Ancillary Changes. This project is expected to cost $95,000 and to be completed in 12 months. The study is funded through the MBTA. The study is supported in full with non-MPO funding, and it will not impinge on other MPO work. The MBTA has requested that CTPS analyze the equity impacts of potential changes to its fare structure and tariffs to be implemented in state fiscal year 2025. These potential changes include a low-income fare program. CTPS has provided technical assistance to the MBTA related to fare structure and tariff changes for more than 25 years. Throughout this project, CTPS will coordinate with the MBTA to analyze equity impacts of a low-income fare program and other potential changes in the MBTA's fare structure and tariffs. In Task 1, CTPS will participate in meetings. In Task 2, CTPS will update inputs to its agent-based model that we've built to report on MBTA fare equity, and it's built from passenger survey responses, annual fare revenue, and ridership data. CTPS will update the inputs to the model in consultation with the MBTA. CTPS will assess how to incorporate the new 2022 passenger survey data into the model. Additionally, CTPS will update the base year fare revenue and ridership data to the most recent, available, and appropriate year. In Tasks 3 and 4, CTPS will model and document the Title VI and environmental justice impacts of the potential fare changes. Using the agent-based model, CTPS will analyze the proposed fare changes and prepare the equity analysis summary results. Potential fare changes will include the MBTA's low-income fare program and any other proposed fare changes. The analysis will report on the effect of the proposed changes on minority and low-income populations using the average fare metric identified in the MBTA's DID policy. In Task 5, if necessary, CTPS will update the analysis in the memo to reflect any additional changes identified during the public process. In Task 6, CTPS will finalize the fare equity analysis memo. We request approval of this work program, and we're happy to take any questions. And I believe Stephen Povich from the MBTA is here if there are any questions about the fare changes themselves.
Great. Any questions for Emily or Stephen? Let's start with Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is Stephen. Would you like to break some news, Stephen, and tell us a little about these possible ancillary changes?
Stephen, are you able to answer Lynn's question?
Yeah.
Is Stephen here? He
Oh,
says,
hi there. Can you
not
hear me
allowed
now?
to unmute. Can someone unmute Stephen?
I think I have been granted the privilege of unmuting.
There we go.
Len, the short answer to your question is that we don't have a list of things that we are certain will make sense to pair with a low-income fare program. I think there are a few different things that are potentially coming down the pipe in terms of both some minor technology changes that might have fare equity implications, and also, as you know, a low-income fare program is highly equity enhancing, which is the focus of Emily's work here, and so gives us the opportunity to potentially make other changes that we've always wanted to make, but it would not on a standalone basis pass an equity analysis, but might make sense for other reasons. So we're still in the planning phases of that. I don't have anything to share now, but as we move forward with anything, we'll certainly let you know.
Yeah, thank you. I'll be more playful than anything else. I'll be happy to support this, but probably Brian's going to beat me to the motion. Thanks again.
Good thing.
Thanks, Len. Brian, do you have a question?
I've never beaten Len once in my life. I want to make it clear. Just to my colleagues on the MPO, just stressing the criticality of having CTPS, which is regarded as a third party, do this work, especially around fare changes. I have led fare change processes at the T before, and it is incredibly not just helpful to the process, but really reassuring to the public to know that there are that a group like CTPS, which is regarded as a neutral arbiter of the facts, is there to do this work and validate or tell the T that they need to make mitigations. So just urge my colleagues on the MPO to vote yes on this, and I plan to do so myself. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Brian. Any additional questions? Seeing none, can I have a motion to approve this work scope as presented today? Len Diggins.
Yes, following on that very poetic, words by Mr. Kane, I'm happy to approve the motion. I make the motion to approve the study.
Thank you, Brian.
Continuing to not beat Len Diggins, I second that motion.
Wonderful. So we have a motion and a second. Judy, can you call the roll, please?
Yep. John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Ally Clayman,
Ally Clayman, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Brian Kane,
And yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Joe Blankenship,
Joe Blankenship, yes.
Eric Molinari,
Eric Molinari, yes.
David Kosis,
David Kosis, yes.
Rob King,
Rob King, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Kristen Guichard,
Kristen Guichard, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Dylan Lukich,
Dylan Lukich, yes.
and Steve Olenoff.
Steve Olenoff, yes.
Great. Motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, and thank you, Emily and Stephen. Next agenda item, number 9, is the federal fiscal year 2023 UPWP Amendment 1. Srilekha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, members of the board. My name is Srilekha Murthy, manager of the Unified Planning Work Program, and I'm here to present Amendment 1 to the federal fiscal year 2023 UPWP for your endorsement following the conclusion of a 14-day public comment period. Next slide, please. To recap, this amendment proposes the inclusion of an MBTA project, the Red Line Transit-Oriented Development District Framework Study, funded through the Federal Transit Administration's pilot program for transit-oriented development planning. It was released for a 14-day public comment period beginning on March 31st and ending on April 14th. Next slide, please. Staff received 2 public comments via email. Both comments were submitted by a Fred Moore, and both indicated that the studies the MPO undertakes were a drain on resources and did not contribute to any meaningful change. Staff responded to both of the comments via email. The copies of the emails can be found in Appendix B of the FFY 2023 UPWP. Next slide, please. So with that, I will ask this board to vote to endorse Amendment 1 as presented today, and I'm happy to take any questions at this time.
Any questions? Brian Kane.
I just have a process question. When do we do 14-day comments versus 21-day comment periods and
I think it's an
What's the deal with that?
adjustment versus an amendment, or Srileka, do you know the answer to that, or any other MPO staff?
I believe we did a 14-day comment period at the chair's discretion last time, because the goal of the comment period was to allow the MBTA project team to connect with the city of Boston and other municipalities in the area to discuss the project.
I remember that. Yeah. I think there was a feeling that given this planning study, there was a request from the city and a few others to have some more information. Okay. Can I have a motion to approve Amendment 1 to the UPWP as presented today? Tom Bent.
I'll make that motion to approve amendment number 1.
Thank you. Ally Clayman.
I will second that motion to approve the amendment.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Judy, can you call the roll, please?
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Ally Clayman,
Ally Clayman, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Brian Kane,
Brian Kane, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Joe Blankenship, I can come back. Oh, go ahead.
I'm Jim. We're doing a tag team. I'm Jim Fitzgerald, joining, subbing in for Joe. But yes, I vote yes.
Got it. Thank you. Eric Molinari,
Eric Molinari, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
Rob King,
Rob King, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Kristen Guichard,
Kristen Guichard, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Dylan Lukich,
Dylan Lukich, yes.
and Steve Olenoff.
Steve Olenoff, yes.
Great, motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And thank you for your presentation. Agenda item 10, which is the federal fiscal year 2024 to 28 Transportation Improvement Program document. Ethan Lapointe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ethan Lapointe. I'm the Transportation Improvement Program Manager for the Boston Region MPO. The purpose of this presentation is to discuss the contents of the draft federal fiscal years 2024 to 28 TIP, such that it may be voted for a release for public comment at the end of this presentation. On the next slide, just to give a brief roundup on what is contained in this presentation, would have started, I should say, with any public comments received since April 13th, for which there have been no public comments received. So we'll move beyond that. There will then be an overview on the TIP development timeline to frame where this discussion falls in relative to other actions that have happened over the course of this past year, a summary of what is included in this draft fiscal years 24 to 28 TIP, not only including the projects, but how overall funding levels represent different subregional needs, and a request for a 21-day public comment release regarding the contents of the TIP and discussion as well. With that, on the next slide, in advance of today's presentation, following previous MPO board meetings, the final TIP scenario, being scenario 6, has been posted for reference. This scenario includes all amendments that were voted on by the MPO board at previous meetings with regard to projects that should be selected for new programming in the TIP. In addition, the draft TIP document is also available on the MPO calendar, including the majority of all chapters, appendices, and critically, contents regarding what projects were voted on and additional descriptions, including the executive summary. With that, on the next slide, just to contextualize this discussion and review the TIP development timeline, the TIP is rewritten annually. And in this case, this process represents the rewrite for the 2024 to 28 timeline. This coming October, there will be another rewrite for 2025 to 2029. As part of this this upcoming TIPS development cycle, it began back in October and into November, really, by not only meeting with project proponents, various municipalities and other stakeholders to discuss different project needs, but compiling those projects and discussions into a universe of projects, such that come December, when the application period really entered full swing for applications for new projects, some of those projects could be considered for funding. This then moved into late winter at the start of 2023, where project scoring ramped up, moving into more recent months with final scores presented to the MPO at March 2nd, and then thereby feeding the draft programming scenarios for the MPO. And lead up between those first draft scenarios and today, staff work with the MPO board and other stakeholders to develop scenarios such that they may be included in a draft tip for public review for today, April 20th. The next step after this meeting, given a target date, is that on June 1st, the final endorsement for the tip is currently expected, such that it may take effect on October 1st, 2023. With that, just to summarize what is contained within the tip on the next slide, this tip includes $6.34 billion of investment across multiple different funding sources. This includes nearly $4 billion of MBTA funding that is included within the tip, and $65 million from both the Metro West Regional Transit Authority and also the Cape Ann Transportation Authority. There's also nearly $1.6 billion from the Massachusetts Department of Transportation's Highway Division and their prioritized projects, and nearly $700 million of regional prioritized highway and transit projects from the Boston Region MPO, shown here on this graphic. The outcome of this tip, as shown on the next slide, is approximately $150 million in new regionally prioritized funding allocated to 21 new regionally prioritized projects across the 5 federal fiscal years of the program. This included 3 new transit modernization projects, the introduction of a fiscal year 2025 project design support pilot, and the introduction of a new bike share support program. As part of this tip development process, there were 8 projects that were delayed, and no projects were recommended for acceleration. In addition, there was continued investment in all currently programmed projects to ensure that the total budgets for these kind of major regional projects could be satisfied. These being Boston's reconstruction of Rutherford Avenue, Somerville's McGrath Boulevard construction, and Lynn's rehabilitation of Western Avenue. These 3 projects have budget estimates that also continue beyond the scope of this current tip and will continue to be supported in subsequent tips, including 25 to 29, which will be the next cycle. On the next slide, to break down what those 21 new projects actually look like and other projects currently included in this tip, as mentioned, there's a little over $697 million worth of investment within the MPO's regionally prioritized project program, amounting to a total of 57 new projects. This included 2 new projects in the Bicycle Network and Pedestrian Connections program, including Malden's Spa Pond Brook Greenway and Natick's Cochituate Rail Trail connection into the Natick Center Station, 10 new community connections projects, one of those projects being the inclusion of that bicycle support line item. There were no, given that the community connections persist as a set aside, this table also indicates that there remains about $8.3 million of unprogrammed community connections funding to be dispersed between federal fiscal years 2025 through 2028, starting again this fall. 4 new complete streets projects, one of these being that fiscal year 25 design support pilot, and the others representing Wakefield's Main Street project, Westwood's Canton Street project, and Boston's Cambridge Street Bridge project. There were no new major infrastructure projects categorized this year or received for application, but there were 3 new transit modernization projects for a total of 4, being the Jackson Square Station Accessibility and Improvements Project, additional funding to the Columbus Avenue Phase 2 project, and the addition of the Rail Transformation Early Action projects at Wilbur Interlocking near Woburn Station, and also at Reading Station for the addition of a new turn track there. There was also the deprogramming of the Forest Hills Station funding of $6.4 million. I should also note as well that at the part of the next TIP development cycle for federal fiscal years 2025 to 2029, there will also be the start of new transit modernization applications, which would be for about $2 million in federal fiscal year 2025. With that, moving on to the next slide to show what the breakdown is for how this funding looks relative to the rest of the MPO's investment program. That 47.1% of total regional target funding is included within the Complete Streets program, nearly 18% in major infrastructure, about 12.5% in transit modernization, 9.5% in bicycle and pedestrian, 6.4% in intersection improvements, 2.8% in community connections, leaving a total amount of unprogrammed funding from that $697 million pool of about 3.7% for various purposes. On the next slide, to show how this stacks up against some of the targets set by the LRTP for targeted allocations of funding. What is shown in the blue here on this graph is the LRTP goal for each of the investment programs, and in orange, how the TIP reflects those investments. What should be noted is that the LRTP does not set a target for an amount of contingency funding or unprogrammed funding to be held in reserve for projects, as evidenced by the final graph there, where there's simply just the unprogrammed funding amount of 3.7%. And what the LRTP for Destination 2040 does not account for is a rewrite in the definition of the major infrastructure investment program, which provided more strict guidelines as to which projects could be constituted as major infrastructure. Hence why the amount of TIP investment in major infrastructure seems lower than the LRTP goal, because of that more tighter goalpost effectively. With that, moving on to the next slide to look at sub-regional distribution across each of the TIP investment programs. This graphic has 4 bars and different stacks for each of the sub-regions within MAPC. The blue bar represents the total percent of regional target funding that sub-region is allocated as part of the 2024 to 28 TIP. The orange bar indicates the percent of population across the sub-region in that sub-region. And by the same coin, the gray bar shows the percent of employment within that sub-region. The yellow bar shows the percent of federal aid roadway miles, defined as roadway miles within that sub-region that are eligible for use, or eligible for the expenditure of federal dollars to make improvements to those areas. Not necessarily, I should add, whether or not that those roadways are in a state of good repair need to have that expenditure, just to clarify. On the next slide, to show how the allocation of the TIP's regional target funding breaks down, after the amendments included within scenario 6 and the programming therein, the new TIP program's $671,508,348 in total regional target funding, leaving an estimated remaining funding allocation of about $26,036,440 across the 5 years. The majority of funding availability in this case can be found in the last 2 fiscal years, as is tradition for TIP development, namely in fiscal years 2027 and 2028, with less unprogrammed funding in near-term years in 24, 5, and 6. On the next slide, just to kind of move forward into today's requested action, as part of the TIP development cycle, staff are requesting that the MPO vote to release the draft 2024 to 28 TIP for a 21-day public comment period. This public comment period will begin on April 26th and conclude on May 17th, and will also incorporate some events with regard to virtual public outreach to answer any questions with regard to what is included in this TIP for members of the public. With that, I'd like to open the floor to discussion before the vote.
Any questions or discussion? Not seeing any. Brian Kane.
Well, if it's appropriate, Mr. Chair, I'd move that we approve this.
Okay. Let's see. Can I have a motion to approve? Len Diggins?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought Brian had approved it. I was going to make the motion. I was going to second it, but I'll make the motion to release the TIP for review.
Okay. Tom Bent? Oh, you're muted, Tom.
I will second that motion.
Okay. Any additional questions or comments? Okay, not seeing any. Judy, why don't you call the roll?
All right, John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Ally Clayman,
Ally Clayman, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Brian Kane,
Brian Kane, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitzgerald, yes. Thank you.
thanks. Eric Molinari,
Eric Molinari, yes.
David Kosis,
David Kosis, yes.
Rob King,
Rob King, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Kristen Guichard,
Kristen Guichard, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Dylan Lukich,
Dylan Lukich, yes.
and Steve Olenoff.
Steve Olenoff, yes.
Great, motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you all. We will move to agenda item 11, which is also an action item, the Long Range Transportation Plan Investment Program allocations and projects. Bradley Putnam.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm here to discuss Long Range Transportation Plan investment programs and projects and to ask for decisions from the board on those topics. Before I begin the slides, I wanted to tell the board that MPO staff have received 3 comment letters in support of including a project in the long range plan. That project is in Lexington at Bedford Avenue, at Bedford Street and Hartwell Avenue. A couple of those letters were mentioned earlier in this meeting. The 3 letters came from Alicia Long, who is the principal at the Trammell Crow Company, from Frederick DeAngelis, Senior Vice President and Senior Counsel at Boston Properties, and Kevin Sheehan, Managing Partner at Great Land Realty Partners. All 3 letters discussed the buildings that the companies own in the project area and how the proposed traffic improvements would benefit the area. All 3 letters said that the Lexington Hartwell Avenue project has been in the MPO's long range plan since 2015, and that keeping the project in the long range plan in 2023 would continue the comfort that the MPO has provided to the people who wrote these letters since 2015. Next slide, please. Today I'd like to provide members with updates about projects that were listed in the 2019 long range plan, the most recent plan that this board passed. I'd like to give a few reminders about investment programs, and then I'll be asking the board to make decisions and vote to approve 3 topics. One is the structure of investment programs in the long range plan. The second is funding allocations to the investment programs. And the third is the list of projects in the long range plan. Next slide, please. So for projects, I wanted to remind the board that in October of 2020, the MPO voted to adopt a new policy that the long range plan would only list projects that are federally required to be included in the long range plan. And those are projects that are regionally significant as defined in guidance from the Federal Highway Administration, and as well as projects that are under review from the National Environmental Policy Act that use federal transportation funding. The board's policy also stated the project would only be programmed for the first 10 years of the long range plan. So in this case, that would be 2024 through 2033. Next slide, please. And so the implications of this policy are, one, that capital funding decisions would be made through the TIP, not through the long range plan. And the second is that the MPO, by only listing projects that are required to be listed in the long range plan, would maximize flexibility on how to spend money outside of the current range of the TIP. So in this case, beyond 2028. Next slide, please. So the previous meeting, members had asked for updates about the projects that were listed in the 2019 long range plan. And I can, in subsequent slides, talk about them in more detail. But on this slide, you can see a summary of the projects that were in the 2019 long range plan. There were 18 projects. 7 of those projects have been completed since 2019. 2 of them are currently under construction. 4 of those projects are required to be listed in the 2023 long range plan as per Federal Highway Administration guidance. 3 of those projects are not required to be listed in the 2023 long range plan per Federal Highway Administration guidance. And there are 2 projects for which the information that staff acquired was not sufficient to determine whether the projects are or are not required to be listed in the long range plan. Next slide, please. So these are 7 projects that were listed in the 2019 long range plan that have been completed: the reconstruction of Pond Street in Ashland, the reconstruction of Ferry Street in Everett, the Green Line extension in Medford and Somerville, the reconstruction of Highland Avenue, Needham Street, the Charles River Bridge in Newton and Needham, a new bridge over the from the Bergen Parkway over the MBTA in Quincy, the reconstruction of Route 1A in Walpole, bridge replacement for New Boston Street over the MBTA in Woburn. Next slide, please. There are 2 projects that were listed in the long range transportation plan in 2019 that are currently under construction, both in Boston, one at Cipher Street, E Street, and Fargo Street, and the other, the Sumner Tunnel underneath Boston Harbor. Next slide, please. There are 4 projects that were listed in the 2019 long range plan that are required to be listed in the 2023 long range plan, the one currently under development as per Federal Highway Administration guidance. One is the Alston Multimodal Project in Boston. The second is the reconstruction of Rutherford Avenue in Boston. The third is the interchange of Interstate 495 and Interstate 90 in Hopkinton. And the fourth is the McGrath Boulevard project in Somerville. Next slide, please. These 3 projects were listed in the 2019 long range plan and are not required to be listed in the 2023 plan per Federal Highway Administration guidance. The interchange of Route 27 and Route 9 in Natick, the reconstruction of Western Avenue, and the rehabilitation of Mount Auburn Street in Watertown. Next slide, please. And these 2 projects were listed in the 2019 long range plan. Based on the information that staff were able to gather about these projects, it is not clear whether they would or would not be required to be listed in the current long range plan. Intersection improvements at Route 126, Route 135, and the railroads in Framingham, and Bedford Street and Hartwell Avenue at the Interstate 95 interchange in Lexington. Next slide, please. So some reminders about investment programs. In Destination 2040, the 2019 long range plan, this is how funding was allocated to investment programs for benchmarks. The largest program was Complete Streets at 45%. The next largest program was the Major Infrastructure Program with a goal of 30%, followed by intersection improvements with 13%, bicycle network and pedestrian connections with 5%, transit modernization with 5%, and the Community Connections Program at 2%. Next slide, please. I just wanted to remind members of the recommendations from staff regarding the structure of the investment programs. Staff had recommended maintaining 5 investment programs as they are. Staff had recommended adding a bike share support investment program. Staff had recommended broadening the existing transit modernization program into a transit transformation program that could begin in federal fiscal year 2029. Next slide, please. So the decisions I'd like to ask the MPO to make today, the first one is regarding the investment program structure. Would the board add a bike share program, and would the board broaden the transit modernization program into a transit transformation program? Next slide. Second, I'd like to ask the board to choose investment funding allocations, the investment programs. What's shown on this slide here is one possible way of doing that. The percentages shown on this slide are similar to what was allocated in 2019, with the exception of adding 1% for a bike share support program that did not exist in 2019. And in this allocation would remove 1% from the intersection improvements program because of its overlap with the Complete Streets program. Next slide. And then the third decision I'd like to ask the board to make is which projects to list in the long range plan. These are the 6 projects that are required to be listed in the current long range plan as per Federal Highway guidance. Rutherford Avenue in Boston, Route 1 at University Avenue in Norwood, McGrath Boulevard in Somerville, and the Interstate 495 and Route 1A ramps in Wrentham. And then 2 projects, 2 MassDOT projects, the Alston Multimodal Project in Boston and the interchange of Interstate 495 and Interstate 90 in Hopkinton. Next slide. So in summary, I'd like to ask for 3 decisions from the board. First, how to structure investment programs to make any changes that you find necessary. The second is how much funding to allocate to each investment program by percentage. And the third is which projects to list in the long range plan. Thank you.
Okay, Bradley, can I Can I ask, can we talk about the projects first, since that's what we had the most public sort of comment on? And I think the decision here is, do we want to just list the projects that are required and leave some of the other ones out, or do we want to include some of the other ones? Particularly, I think we've heard about obviously the Lexington Route 4 225 project and the Framingham project, both of which staff it's unclear whether they're required to be listed on the plan. Is that correct?
Correct.
And okay, and then I think particularly for the Framingham project, what we've heard from Dennis is a desire for I think for some to better understand the sort of the input from the MPO, and also better understanding kind of what that project is doing and what the status is for the city. And so, but why don't we talk about the projects first, and then we'll talk about the investment programs. So I see Leonard has his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my understanding too is that we do preliminary scores on some projects, or we are capable of doing preliminary scores on projects in the LRTP universe. Do I remember seeing some scores, or did I dream that up?
Staff do have some scores from the long range plan from 2019. As you saw, some of those projects have been built and some have not yet. Some projects have been scored in the TIP. I apologize, I don't have the TIP scores in front of me right now. But the MPO projects that are required to be listed in the long range plan, for example, Norwood, University Avenue, and Rutherford Avenue in Boston, those have been scored through the TIP process. And part of the policy that the MPO voted to approve in 2020 was that projects that are the TIP, being the capital planning document, would also be the governing document for scoring projects.
Right. But in terms of determining which projects go into the LRP, so the only the ones that we have to put in do we put in. But we still there are projects that could go into the RRP, the RTP, that don't go in, but we only put in the ones that because of their costs and their the size of the region that they affect, that they put in the LRTP, correct?
Correct. There are projects that are required to be listed per federal regulations, and if the board were to stay with its policy adopted in 2020, the board would only list the required projects. And so then I think the discussion would be whether to list additional projects that it's not clear whether they are required.
Right. But I guess what I'm getting at though is there could be projects that would be big enough to go into LRTP that we don't put in, right? Because we decided that we just don't want to do them. Correct?
Yeah, I think, Len, the decision that we sort of made a couple of years ago was that the TIP development is the right process for selecting projects. We have a better handle on what the project is. We're doing it sort of in the next kind of 5-year time band, and that the long range plan really should not be like a 30-year capital plan.
Oh yeah.
And so we were trying to move away from programming projects. If you went back 10 or more years ago, we were programming projects, 15 years out, this kind of a thing. And so we were seeking guidance, and I think the feds gave some updated guidance on that. So we're trying to pull that back. What is affecting what's happening here in particular is if we follow that policy, then the Lexington project and the Framingham project would potentially not be identified on the plan. Now, that doesn't mean that the MPO is saying they're not committed or support those projects. And I think that's sort of the gray area that people would prefer to have their document on their project on something versus, off of something. And I think that's the decision that needs to be, made.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and forgive me for not asking my question clearly. But just try and give an example to explain where I'm getting at. So let's say we had like six $100 million projects that affect the whole region. But they have various scores. Would all six of those have to go into the LRTP? They would be done in second band. So just 10 years out. Outside of the current band for the tip, but in that second band, which we are programming in the LRTP, how would we then, choose amongst those six? Would we say all six of them have to go because they, fit the definition of what goes into the LRTP, or would we have some discretion as to which of those six go in?
I don't know. I mean, for example, we are not, Brad, for the long range plan, by including them in the projects in the plan, are we putting them in a time band, and are we putting cost estimates associated with them?
Yeah, so there are, so I think the key time band, as Len was referring to, would be the second time band, because the first time band is 24 through 28, and that's already covered by the tip that the board voted a few minutes ago to release for public comment. And then the policy that the board voted on a couple of years ago was to not program projects farther than 10 years in the future, as you were saying before, Eric. So I think the time band to focus on is 29 through 33, because that's between 6 and 10 years from now. But I do want to remind members that the long range plan is a fiscally constrained document. And so based on information from the Mass Association of Regional Planning Agencies, the MPO might have somewhere in the realm of $800 million available to spend during that second time band, the 29 to 33. If the MPO were to choose to spend 30% of that on major infrastructure, that would be roughly $250 million to spend on all major infrastructure projects over that 5-year time band. And the MPO has already elected to fund in the first time band the projects at Rutherford Avenue in Boston and McGrath Boulevard in Somerville, and it's possible that funding commitments to those projects could continue into the second time band, 29 to 33, which reduces the amount of money that's available that's not yet committed to projects in 29 to 33. And so if the MPO were to list additional projects in that second time band, it would be important to consider how much that would reduce the amount of funding available potentially for other projects.
And essentially, what I'm trying to get is, what is the rationale that we use for picking which projects go into that second time band? That's also, I was wondering if we had like preliminary scores or something, or what is the rationale that we use for choosing those? That's all. And I just mean that in the positive, exploratory way. I'm not being critical of the process. I'm just trying to understand. That's all. Thank you.
Let me see. I mean, yeah, let me go on.
Sure, that's fine. Thank you.
Let me go on to Brian.
Yeah.
And then but Len, let's make sure, let's come back to this. I don't want to.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure, no problem. I appreciate that.
Brian.
Thanks. Just wanted to urge my colleagues to support the proposal to move to transit transformation. I think
wait, Brian, can we just talk about the projects right now?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just don't want to. I'd like to like deal with the projects and get closure on that, and then go to the investment programs, if that's okay.
Of course, I will hold.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you. Let me go to Ken Miller.
Thank you, Eric. The last time that the MPO discussed the long range plan and made the decision to not include projects beyond the first 2 5-year time bands, I think I said that I thought that was a lost opportunity, and I think I'm going to take the opportunity again to say the same thing. I think it's a huge lost opportunity for the MPO to sort of let the public know and implementing agencies what the MPO thinks are the best projects to do long term. This is one of the jobs of the MPO. And that is that is one of the primary uses of the long-range transportation plan is to get information out there, to let the public know what the opportunities are for these, larger projects, the ones that have to be programmed in the plan, and to sort of coalesce around and support these large projects. If the MPO does not do it, or chooses to not do it, other entities will, and so the MPO will be playing catch up and end up supporting, having in effect to support projects that are underway or supported by other entities, which we've seen in the past. So I'm just putting in a pitch to maybe revisit that policy decision that the MPO made. In terms of where those large projects come from and how do you pick them? Well, that's the job of the MPO and its staff to do the planning that's required to make those, look at what the opportunities are and make some evaluations. Again, this is just a plan. It's not it's not an implementation plan. It's not a tip, but it is a way to sort of express what the MPO thinks that what priority should be, and that is the job of the MPO for this region. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. I'm going to pass the chair baton to David Moeller, and I think David has joined us. And David, are you here? Yeah, I see you.
I'm here.
And David, what we've done is Bradley Putnam gave a great overview of the long-range plan and the decisions that he's interested in us making, which really are the investment program structure and sort of the overall investment program funding allocations. We've jumped to number 3 here, though. We're talking about whether to include what projects to include in the long-range plan. Do we just include the ones that are federally required, or do we include any others? Particularly, we heard quite a bit of public comment at the beginning of the meeting regarding the Lexington Hartwell Ave project, and that's kind of where we stand right now.
Okay. So Steve Olenoff, do I see you with your hand up, or is that an old hand?
New hand. So I'm glad you're back, Dave, because this relates to you quite a bit. I just wanted to remind everyone that the TRIC subregion, the highest priority project for them for like 25 years now has been the Canton interchange, and it's had a long history. And for a long time, it hasn't appeared at all on the long-range transportation plan. Originally, it was on there. I think from back in 2020, it was put on for the fourth, set of 5 years. So it was originally on the plan at one time for 2015 to 2020, and then what happened after that is that MassDOT, in order to free up more money on the target money for the MPO, agreed to fund it directly from the MassDOT fund. So it was removed from the long-range transportation plan, but then the funding wasn't available for it, and so for many years the project went into kind of a limbo state where it wasn't on the long-range transportation plan because there wasn't any funding identified for it, but it wasn't on the it wasn't there anywhere for on the MPO target money because the state had agreed to do it. So I just want to remind that 25 years now, it's somehow I hope to find the funding for that. But relating to what's happening today, so the TRIC subregion knows what it feels like to have a big project and not have it listed anywhere. And so I would be very much in favor of having the Lexington project and the Framingham project appear somehow or in some way in the long range transportation plan. Right now, the Canton project is listed under the universe of projects there for $202 million. At least it's there in writing where you can see it. I think we should do that same something listing. We should get listed the Lexington and the Framingham projects on there. And as you know, I've been on the MPO for a long time. Those two projects have been around for as long as I can remember also. So I think we should do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Dennis Giambetti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome. I just wanted to reiterate what was said by the Lexington folks at the beginning of the meeting, the comments that were made by Framingham at last meeting that we held, as well as Steve's comments here. When it's appropriate time, and there's been a main motion to this, I will request that I amend to add Framingham and Lexington to the long range transportation plan. I think the word that Bradley used, that there's uncertainty around whether they should or should not be. I think we should, because they're on we voted in 2019, that we made those commitments back then, that we should err on the side of caution and allow those two projects to continue around the uncertainty. So I'll be prepared to do that when the time comes. And I hope that the MPO will support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Brian Kane.
Thanks, David. And I just wanted to ask a question and make a comment, I guess. I mean, so I heard what Ken Miller said, and I agree. It is our job to set a vision here. Long-range transportation planning is about visioning. It's not about allocating. It's not about implementing. I guess where I don't feel like I have enough information, though, is around what the rough dollar amounts will be to try to program a fiscally constrained LRTP in the out years. And maybe I just don't understand it. Frankly, I've never understood where any of the money for any of these things come from. It's always been a mystery to me, and I'm someone that pays attention pretty closely to this stuff. So I guess my question is, how can we reasonably program 10 years out without any basis of knowing what the money will be, even based on past precedent with a relatively, stable inflation rate or whatever? And I guess I just don't get how we're supposed to do this in a vacuum. Thank you.
Right. So I will answer some of this. So we do have projections of revenue for the entire length of the transportation plan. And because we do this in 5-year bands, we have 5-year projections of revenue. Now, let me just say for the record yet again, that I think it's one of the dumbest things the federal government does is to require a financially constrained long-range plan and pretend we actually know how much money we're going to have 25 years from now. But that's their rule, not mine. So we do have it. And we have it estimated, and it's part of what staff, the reason all three of these things are here, like we have funding allocations by program. And I think our number for major infrastructure is 30%. And then staff does a calculation where they say, okay, in this 5-year band, and I'm making these numbers up because I don't remember them, there's $1 billion. So theoretically, there's $300 million available for major infrastructure. So if the MPO decides to do this, that's what you can do, right? You can say, okay, what's the Framingham project cost? Or the Lexington one, but I just use Framingham because Dennis was the last person to talk. What's the Framingham project cost? And then what's it cost in the band you want to put it in? Because if you have to account for inflation, and then you can program it in there. I think what the MPO had decided was they weren't programming things in the last 3 bands, but might program in the first 2 bands, and the first band is actually just a tip anyway. So it is doable. The question is it advisable, I guess, right? And it's doable, back in the olden days, when I first started here, we did it, we fully constrained the RTP and programmed major infrastructure projects out 25 years in advance. And had things that we said in 25 years, we'll get to that project. You know, I think that was a false promise to people. To Steve Olenoff's point about the Canton interchange, I don't think we necessarily ever kept any of those commitments, but we at least let people believe that we would. So you know, it is an issue that the MPO has to decide what we want to do on.
Well, if I might just follow up,
Yep, of course.
I agree. And I remember some of those, you know, discussions about demonstration projects and all that garbage that we knew we were never going to do. And so I guess my question then becomes, does it not make more sense for this MPO to treat the LRTP as a policy document and then say to the general court, hey guys, this is how much money we think we have to do what we all know is important, that this region says is important. You need to fill it in and figure that out. Now, David, I know you're a state employee and you would never say things like that. But you know, I'm a little less constrained. And so I have no problem doing that, especially with projects like Canton and Framingham and Lexington that we've heard about that have been on this interminable wait list forever. It seems to me like we should take this as an opportunity to put a stake in the ground and say these things are important, but we can't afford them in our current structures, but we got to do them.
Well,
I'll get off my high horse.
Well, I will get on my high horse for a second, Brian, before I call on Lynn. So yes, but it's also important for this MPO to do this in a reasoned policy way, right? If we have a policy that we want to discourage single occupancy vehicle travel in the future, we need to make a decision of, does that mean that we're actually all in on all of these big highway projects or not, right? And you know, I don't know enough to say it means yes or no, right? You could still think that, again, just to you pick a project out of the air, you could still think that Canton Interchange is an important project and should be done even while you're trying to reduce single occupancy vehicle travel in the future. But you at least need to look at and decide, right? And so that's also part of, you know, part of the decision that has to be made today is if we're going to do this, we have to do some kind of reason to look at these things to say, is it just the fact that you were in a prior LRTP gets you in this one, or are we going to look at individual projects and ask about what their benefits are and what their costs are, and actually try to you know, build out the bands in that way? And by the way, at that point, I think, and I missed Ken's comments, unfortunately, you know, there are other projects that aren't those two that people might want to talk about, right? You know, again, I make no distinct, you know, this is not an endorsement of a project, but it is clear that the red blue connector is out there for some discussion at some point in the future. If we're going to start putting projects in the LRTP in outer bands, are we just going to talk about the two that were in previous LRTPs, or are we going to actually open it up and do this whole thing where let's program 25 years worth of projects financially constrained for 30%? I mean, those are decisions that have to be made if that's the road we're going down. Lynn?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, because you essentially said a lot of things that I was going to say and some of the things I said earlier, because my whole question is, what is the basis for choosing projects that go into the RTP? You know, as I said earlier, I thought I recalled that we do a preliminary evaluation of these projects, on limited criteria, in order to help us with the selection process. But once again, maybe I dreamt that up, but if we aren't, maybe we should, because I would like to see some kind of rationale for how we choose those projects, and we have the fundamentals of what should be the basis of that rationale, and that is that they are continuous, cooperative, and comprehensive. And we have other criteria that we use for choosing projects in the TIP, and we can use those. And so now I think it becomes a question of staff capacity. And even to a certain extent, we do have to even choose which project we're going to evaluate, because the universe that I saw was pretty big, and we probably wouldn't have the capacity to do a preliminary evaluation of all of them, but that could all then fit into the vision that we have for the region taking into account distribution, across the region, and equity, so that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ken?
Thank you, David. Just a clarification on something and maybe a suggestion. Just to Brian's point about the demonstration projects were those, or illustrative projects, I guess they were called, were actually not projects in the plan. Those are the projects that could not fit in the plan due to funding constraints. So that's what those illustrative projects were. The projects in the plan were in the plan. Like David says, physical constraint plan. Regarding fiscal constraint and where the money comes from, perhaps it would maybe a suggestion, maybe it would be helpful that after the annual targets meeting with all of the regional planning agencies in January, maybe the presentation is done to each MPO, because while MPO members are invited, it's not clear that a lot of them have the time to attend that meeting every year. So it may be helpful to just walk through, how the annual targets are created and what it means looking forward for the long range plan also. And finally, just in terms of how to pick projects and evaluating projects and things that sort of stick around for a long time. Well, if the MPO decided that the Canton Interchange or the Red Blue Connector or you pick it, was important and a high priority and included in the plan, and that would be a signal that that's a priority of the MPO and that funding perhaps would be available, and maybe project development would actually proceed for those projects. I mean, look what there, and speaking of highway projects, I know I'm wondering a little bit, but there is this MPO is funding a very large highway project, the 495-90 project, out in Hopkinton. That was in the plan. It's being implemented now. The priority of that project, I know it was a state priority and the MPO went along, and that's fine. But the MPO has the opportunity to review other entities' priorities and make its own decisions as to what it wants to include. And just because this MPO has a policy of not wanting to increase non-single occupancy vehicles, that's a great policy. That doesn't mean you never do a highway project, because you do highway projects for lots of reasons, for safety reasons, for congestion, all kinds of things. And by the way, that's what the 495-90 project is about. It's primarily safety. So, just because something is a big highway project doesn't mean it's counted to the MPO policies. Again, I think this is a lost opportunity for the MPO. Thank you.
Brian King.
Thank you. So something that my organization has been saying for many years is that the way that we fund transportation in Massachusetts is fundamentally broken. The T is going to be 13 billion short, even while borrowing $600 million a year every year forever, or starting in July of 2024, which is not that far away. Our roads and bridges are chronically underfunded. We fixed a bunch of bridges 10 years ago by borrowing against future federal funds like these. The gas tax is woefully inadequate in a society that's moving to electrification. And our tolling policy has on one set of roads only, but not others, is clearly not working to make things equal for all. And I say that as someone who grew up on the South Shore and never paid a toll when I drove into Boston. So we don't have enough money to do what we need to do, let alone what we want to do. So I hear red, blue, I hear all kinds of stuff that I would love to support, and God help us. GLX is going to cost the T $10 million a year to operate over and above fair revenue, and South Coast Rail is going to be in the $20 million to operate over and above fair revenue. So there's not enough money to operate what we currently have, and I would include our highway system on that, quite frankly, because most of Mass Highway is funded by borrowed money. So, okay, here we are. Now we got to make some decisions. We have a 10-pound bag of stuff, and we have a 5-pound. We have 10 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound bag. What are we going to do? Well, I think one thing that we can do as an MPO, as a region, as a group of folks that pay very close attention to this and know very well what the local needs are. I haven't even talked about the funding shortfall that is Chapter 90 for cities and towns that we all know is real. So I think we can use this LRTP as an opportunity to just spell out what the need is, and then say, here's what we got, here's what's available to fix it, and show that gap. And in showing that gap, maybe, just maybe, someone will pay attention to it. But I don't know. It seems to me like doing things the way we've always done it isn't working, and we should probably try something else. Okay, now I'm really getting off my high horse.
Thank you, Brian. Other comments? All right, so if I think I know where we are. I think we decided to take projects listed in the LRTP first. And we need a vote, and I think staff's recommendation, and correct me if I'm wrong, based on previously adopted and or expressed MPO policy. I mean, I don't want anybody to think this was staff just decided this, okay? Is that we would list in the project in the LRTP specific projects that are in the tip or that are in the first, I think it's, Bradley, correct me if I'm wrong, the first 2-year bands that have air quality impacts, and that would therefore not necessarily include either the Framingham project or the Lexington project or any of the other projects that are in the universe of projects. I think that is, Bradley, that's staff's recommendation, again, based on MPO policy, correct?
Right. The MPO's policy was to only include projects that are required to be listed in the long-range plan. And so staff gathered information about all the projects in the universe that were presented to this board earlier this spring. Based on the information staff gathered, staff determined that there were 6 projects that are required to be listed per Federal Highway Administration guidance, and that there are 2 additional projects in Lexington and Framingham that the information was insufficient to determine whether they are required to be listed.
And those projects, are we listing projects beyond the first 2 bands, Bradley?
So part of the policy this MPO voted to adopt a couple of years ago was to only list projects in the first 10 years of the plan, which is the first 2 time bands. The first one overlaps with the tip, and the second time band is 29 through 33.
Okay, so that's staff's recommendation. Again, staff's recommendation based on previously adopted and or discussed MPO policies. So we need to decide, do we want to go with that recommendation and limit project listing to the first 2 time bands and also to only those that require air quality conformity analysis that we've definitely defined, which would, for this purposes, exclude from the LRTP currently Lexington and Framingham and any other project that is going to be implemented beyond the 2-year time band. Or we can conversely decide that those policies were wrong and we want to list more projects and define which projects those are. But Bradley needs an answer. So I saw Lynn had his hand up, and then Dennis has his hand up, and at some point, neither of you need to make a motion. You can just have comments, but at some point someone needs to make a motion so we can put something on the table and get to the next 2 issues that poor Bradley still needs us to decide. Lynn?
I understand. I mean, and look, I mean, I think we're kind of late in the game to really change the way we do things this cycle. But I think we should, first year, next year, start determining how we're going to handle the next cycle, respect to what we program. And so, with respect to the projects that are recommended, just one quick question: the 6 that we have chosen for air quality concerns, were those the only 6 that met that criteria, or were there more with those 6?
Yeah, so staff analyzed, gathered information on all the projects in the universe, that was presented earlier this spring. And the 6 required projects are those that, according to the information staff pulled together, those are the 6 that are required to be listed.
And those are the only 6.
And Bradley, what are those 6?
Aaron, could you go back about 3 slides? No, that's it. Yeah, so 4 MPO projects and 2 MassDOT projects that are shown on this slide.
All right. So we weren't choosing 6 from a larger number. These were the only 6.
So these are the 6 that, based on the information staff gathered, are required to be listed in the long range plan.
Okay. All right. Thanks. All right.
But,
go
but
ahead.
again, they're required to be listed in the long range plan if the MPO supports them and there's a financial plan that says they can be fully funded. Okay. We are not listing projects in the plan that we don't have the financial capacity to deliver. And we're not listing projects in the plan that the MPO doesn't support. So if the MPO doesn't, obviously the MPO supports Rutherford Avenue, we put it in the tip. Obviously we support McGrath Boulevard, it's in the tip. Obviously, Hopkinton's under construction. Clearly we supported it, it's going to keep going. Alston, the MPO doesn't have to include Alston. And I have a question about whether Alston's fully funded and should be included in the plan anyway. Rentham, I think it's in the tip, maybe not, I don't know. But so these projects are all theoretically ready to be ready in the first 2 time bands, right? Because clearly there are things, if Red Blue's in the universe, Red Blue would need to be in this list if we thought Red Blue was going to be delivered in the next 2 time bands, right? And is Red Blue in the universe, Bradley?
It is not.
Okay, so that's the other issue, Lynn. There's a universe, but there's projects that aren't in the universe also. Okay, so Bradley gave an answer to your question that was 100% correct, but it's not that these are the only 6 projects. These are the only 6 projects that are in our universe that we knew would have to be included if we wanted to fund them.
Okay, well, that was the answer that I was looking for. So thank you very much. Okay.
Yep. Dennis G. and Betty.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion just to have a discussion point.
Thank you,
My motion would be to include the 6 required projects and to also add Lexington and Framingham to the long range transportation plan.
Thank you, Dennis. Is there a second?
So I am just trying to find a place to sit or stand.
Is there a second? Brian King?
Second that.
Okay, Steve Olenoff seconds that. Discussion. Eric Barassa, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I actually was going to ask a question about the Alston multimodal project, and I'm glad you raised it, because my understanding is that is a potentially $1.5 billion project. Obviously, it's going through environmental permitting right now, and the costs will change and things like that. And my understanding is there is not really a funding plan, and so if we list it in the long range plan, what are the implications of that? And is that just a number that goes in there, and then it makes federal discretionary grants more competitive? I'm just thinking, like, what are sort of the implications of listing it or not listing it?
Right. So I need help from our federal partners on this, because I'm not clear on what the answer is. I'm not clear. I don't know whether this MPO can list this as a financially constrained project that says we're going to get $1 billion of discretionary money from the feds, and whether the Fed will bless that as a financially constrained project list. I don't know.
Yeah, because while I think the project has lots of merit, and MAPC is supportive, there's some aspects of it that we'd like to see be different or better. Obviously, that amount of funding for essentially what you could define as almost like an expansion project is going to come at the expense of a lot of critical state of good repair needs in the region, and that's the kind of trade-off that I think it needs to be understood vis-a-vis kind of the costs and everything. So would love to have more input. I don't know if if that is something the feds could weigh in on.
Mr. Chair, may I?
Yes.
The 4 MPO projects that's on this table would be part of the fiscal constraint because these projects are already included in the 24-28 tip. But according to the federal highway guidance that to the understanding of MPO staff, the long range plan is required to list other projects in some cases, even if they're not funded by the MPO. And in this case, that would be the Alston multimodal project and the Hopkinton interchange. The Alston multimodal project, to the understanding of staff, is subject to elevated review under NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, and for that reason needs to be included in the long range plan, even though there's no MPO commitment to funding it.
Ben?
Hi, that's essentially correct. That's essentially correct. I mean, it is, we are relying on a letter that we received from former secretary that said that, that the state is working on a funding plan for the Alston project. To your point, Eric, about taking money away, there is no requirement that a project needs to be in a plan regardless of the funding source. So there are projects that can be a project in the transportation plan that's not funded by MPO funds at all.
Right.
We don't know what the funding category, what the funding plan is for Alston yet, I guess, but that doesn't mean necessarily. It could be some combination of private funds, toll funds, MPO funds, state, who knows?
So I'm just going to, I have a really simple question.
Okay.
Can we have in the LRTP an assumption that the US DOT will give us $1 billion in discretionary money for the Alston project?
I guess the definition for including funding in the plan is whether it's there's a reasonable expectation that you will have.
Well, I reasonably expect it, but I don't know about you, kid.
Look, the Alston project was in the last plan based on, the commitment to seek a funding, to develop a funding plan, and I think we're still okay with that.
Okay. Eric, did you get your answer?
And just one thing, if I may, this does have to be the project does have to be in the plan for us to take a federal action in the environmental process. So that we would, while the EIS is the draft EIS is underway, that process is underway. For that process to conclude with us approving something, the project has to be in the plan.
I mean, I think it makes sense to include it in the plan with an understanding that, the funding is not, this is not like a written in stone commitment on what the funding source is.
Steve Olenoff.
So given what I've heard in this discussion, then why shouldn't the Canton interchange and the red blue connector be included here on the list of projects? I think either Dennis should amend his motion to include that, or I'll make a further motion afterwards. Thank you.
You're welcome. So on the first motion, any other discussion? It's yes, Brian King.
Thank you for recognizing me. Is it possible for can you answer the question that Steve just asked around, based on what we just heard, is there a reason or not to just include things like the Canton interchange and red blue, and I would add regional rail?
Right. So I will answer. I'll try to answer. First off, someone has to figure out which band it's going in. Okay, it's not even Dennis's thing. Somebody's got to tell us what year we think we're going to deliver these two projects that are going to be put in. My assumption was Dennis was saying put them in year band 2, assuming they fit within our 30% constraint. But once at some point, we're not. If you add Canton and you add red blue and you add regional rail, we're now clearly gone beyond the first two time bands, and people have to identify what time band they want to put it in and how much they think it will cost, so that staff can actually put together what again has to be a financially constrained plan, right? So that this is what we can do, right? We can do this by individual motions and take Dennis's first, and if it passes, we'll put Lexington and Framingham at some price in some time band. And then we can take motions about other projects, and people can just start naming the projects that they would like to see the MPO make some kind of commitment in the long range plan to within a funding pot of money that we've defined. That's why. I mean, yes, we can, but it's not just here's a list of project staff, put them in the plan. Somebody's got to tell Bradley, okay, what year, which project, how much, because it is. Again, because the federal government requires it, it's a financially constrained plan to I think this one goes out to 2050, right? So, you know, that needs to happen. Is you can't just tell Bradley, here's 12 projects, plot them in, please. At least I don't think we can. It doesn't seem fair to me to do that to Bradley. David Kozis.
All right, I'm starting to get a little uncomfortable because, you know, I just sense that there's many projects that want to get into the plan. We happen to hear about some of them today, right? We heard about Lexington, we heard about Framingham. We've heard these before. Red Blue was mentioned. You know, these are all important projects. I just have no real sense right now of what else there is out there that didn't happen to be mentioned today. So I just wonder if someone could just say some of the other important projects that we know, you know, we've heard before that want to get on the plan that we just didn't happen to hear about right now, if there are any.
Well, so there's clearly the Canton interchange, it's been discussed. There's Red Blue. There's possibly, it could be the other I-93, I-95 interchange. At one point, it was in the long range plan, the one that's in Woburn and Lexington, or Woburn and Reading. It could be GLX2, right? Which this MPO had in its long range plan and then took out, and is now somehow fallen off the face of the earth, and we're not talking about it anymore. It could be some other projects. To Brian just threw in regional rail, right? There's a whole host of projects it could be. Now, to do a little differentiation between Dennis's motion and everything else, I think Framingham and Lexington were in the last plan, specifically listed as projects to be funded in the last plan, and many of these others, or maybe all of these others, were not. And that is partially what distinguishes Dennis's motion from, well, if we're going to start this, why can't we talk about Canton, and why can't we talk about Red Blue, and why can't we talk about whatever else? I think. Bradley, is that correct? Is Lexington and Framingham the only two that were in the last plan that would not be in the new plan based on this list of projects?
So there were earlier in the presentation, there were, I believe, 5 or 6 projects that were listed in the 2019 plan that are not required to be listed, that either are not required to be listed in the 2023 plan, or it's not clear whether they're required based on current federal highway guidance.
And which projects are those, Bradley?
Aaron, could you go back a few slides, a few more slides, one more slide. Yeah, so these 3 projects were listed in the 2019 long range plan, and based on the information staff have collected, are not required to be listed in the 2023 long range plan. Route 27, Route 9 in Natick, Western Avenue in Lynn, Mount Auburn Street in Watertown. And then the next slide, please. So these 2 projects, based on the information staff collected, we weren't able to make a determination on whether they are or are not required to be listed in the plan, Framingham and Lexington.
Right, but the previous 3 are all actually in the tip or under construction. Is that correct? Or is I'm not clear if Natick's in the tip or under construction, but I know Watertown's in the tip. I think Lynn Western Avenue's at the end of the tip.
Natick is in the tip, David, if I could add.
All right, Bradley, I think all 3 of these are in the tip. So that is what, again, distinguishes these 3. People don't care if their project's in the plan, as long as it's in the tip, right? Everybody understands the tip's really the 5-year construction project. So these communities aren't concerned they're not in the plan anymore because they're still in the tip, and nobody's talking about taking them out of the tip. The other two aren't in the tip because they're nowhere near ready to be in the tip. But they want, well, I actually don't know if Lexington's near ready. I shouldn't say that. Framingham is at pre-25%. I don't know where Lexington is, but they're not in the tip, and so they want to get in the plan so that there is still some sense that the MPO remains committed to them, like we were in 2019 when they were originally put in the plan. I guess, I think. But Dennis, if I said something that's wrong, please feel free to correct me. Eric, we still have a motion on the table that we have to vote on at some point, but Eric?
Yeah, I would just say, I think we need, for projects that are MBTA projects, for projects that are major, highway projects, I think we need the implementing agencies to be the ones that are bringing it. The reason why Alston is here is because it's had a multi-year planning process, and it's deep into an environmental, permitting process. I think that's different than some of the other ones. And I'm going to have to step away. I may miss this vote, but I'll be back shortly.
All right. Brian? Oh, I guess Brian, did you have something you want to say? Or
I don't think that only implementing agencies should bring projects forward, because we all know how planning works or doesn't work, whatever. I'm not going to leave that one alone.
That's planning with a small p, not planning with a big P, which is
Small p, very much a small p. So I guess, David, to your point, if there is a theoretical advantage given to Framingham and Lexington because they were in the last plan, does that not then argue to put more stuff in this plan so that when we take them out, which we inevitably will do, they have another advantage in 25 when we do this again?
Yeah, so
this is such a farcical process.
I don't
even
know
why
Brian,
we're doing this.
I don't know, Brian, and I also yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know the answer. I will leave it.
No,
at that.
I don't either. I guess I just don't know what we're even doing at this point.
Kim Miller, mate. No, Kim?
I'm not exactly sure what you are doing. I probably have a suggestion of what you could be doing. And that, it's really up to this MPO and the staff to plan of identifying projects, evaluating them, and prioritizing, working with the board to decide what projects should be in the plan, just like you decide what projects are in the TIP. And that, there should be a process where projects, these larger projects are vetted and evaluated and decisions made. I understand the concern, Brian, that you expressed, that this at this point seems to be a sort of a haphazard kind of thing. And I agree, but that doesn't mean that's the way it needs to happen. And maybe, I'm not sure, I don't recall the timeline for getting the plan in place right now. And there may not be enough time to go through that kind of rigorous vetting and evaluation process, for this plan, but plans can be amended. And once this plan is in place, it's required to be in place by a certain time. This MPO could be developing UPWP right now. You could put in the work to try to get at some of those answers. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
All right, so there's a motion on the table to include Framingham and Lexington's projects in the LRTP, and it has been seconded. Any other discussion? Ally Clayman.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Just following up on Ken's comment, is there a timeline that this needs to be decided and approved on? I'm not clear on that. Sorry if I missed it.
No worries. Bradley's got his hand up. Bradley.
So staff are informed by staff at MassDOT that the long-range plan needs to be adopted by the MPO in July. And prior to that, it needs to be part of a public comment period that would need to start in June, and staff need a couple months to pull it all together. So staff would very much appreciate having a decision on this topic today. as was previously mentioned, there's always the opportunity to amend the plan later should policy priorities change.
Thank you, Bradley. And that timeline is set by the federal government that requires the plan to be adopted, a new plan to be adopted. I think it's every 4 years. And the federal staff needs, I think it's 60 days, but it might be 45 days for review. So working back from the beginning of the fiscal year where it needs to be adopted, gets you to the MPO needs to be done by July. Ken, did you just raise your hand again? Or is it still up from before?
No, I'm sorry. I should take it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Oh, Tom Bennett.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, for the
No
last.
worries. No worries at all, Tom.
Still kind of, I've been doing this a long time, but this one's really confusing me. I got to tell you that. You know, I really, at this point, don't really feel ready to vote on this, but I do have a question. If we are going to make the vote, we're going to vote on the motion that's on the floor. Don't you have to go back to the motion E to ask what time band and the amounts that we're approving? Because I thought that's what you said earlier.
Actually, yeah. Well, Bradley, do you have cost estimates for these projects?
So the information I have is the most recent I heard from Lexington was that the project would be in the range of $40 to $50 million. And my understanding is also that project has not yet gone to the MassDOT Project Review Committee. So I don't know how that might change were it to go through the Project Review Committee process. The cost estimate I had for the City of Framingham project was $115 million, but that was the same cost estimate that was listed in the 2019 long range plan. So I don't know if there's a more recent cost estimate for that. I think there's also a suggestion that maybe that project could be redesigned at some point, which could further change its characteristics. That's the information I have.
All right. So, Dennis?
Yeah,
Can you give us a cost estimate?
I think the best cost estimate is what Bradley just mentioned. I think those are the ones that we should go with. They're the best available.
And Dennis, again, I'm asking you again, you would seek to put these projects in the second year time band, is that right?
The second time band that we're discussing, staying within the 10 years.
All right, and Steve Olenoff, you were the seconder. You're okay with that clarification of this motion? Is that true?
Yes, I agree.
Okay. So Lynn Diggins, you have a question?
Just a statement. So because they were in the previous LRTP, I'm inclined to support it, and I will hope that we would commit to next year reevaluating this process and coming up with a better way of doing it. It seems like we do that every 4 years, anyways. Thank you. I'm going to support it.
You're welcome. Any other comments before we take this vote? Seeing none, please call the roll.
David Muller,
Geez, I don't know. So I'm going to vote no because I think the MPO voted on a policy that said we weren't going to list projects that didn't have to be listed. And to be clear, this vote doesn't mean I don't think the Framingham and Lexington projects should proceed and the MPO should support them. I just think we shouldn't put, we just adopted a policy this year, and I have a hard time voting against the policy we adopted. So I'll vote no.
great. John Bouchard,
John Bouchard votes no for the same reasoning.
John Romano,
John Romano votes no for 3 in a row.
Ellie Kleeman,
Ellie Kleeman, no.
Eric Barassa, I don't believe is back yet. Brian Kane,
Kane, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald, I'll move on to Eric Molinari,
Eric Molinari, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis. I think no.
Rob King,
I've really appreciated this discussion today. Rob King, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, Yes.
Kristen Guichard,
Kristen Guichard, no, and I just want to say that I don't think that there are bad projects. They seem like really good projects. Only that, jumping in new here, it seems like the policy was just set and maybe we want to review that for the next year, but also the fact that there's not as much information on the two, and they don't have, haven't gone through the PRC meeting yet to understand some more detailed information.
thank you. Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Dylan Lukich,
Dylan Lukich, yes.
Steve Olenoff,
Steve Olenoff, yes.
and Jim Fitzgerald, you're in the meeting. Are you able to vote now?
Yeah, sorry, I had meet problems. I'll vote yes.
Okay. That calls the roll, Mr. Chair.
And I think it passed 10-7 in my head. I was counting. I think I counted it right. It passed, correct?
Yeah, we have 9 yeses.
Okay, but it passed, right?
I believe so. Is it 2/3 of those present?
I don't know. Is this a 2/3 vote? I don't even know that. Tegan? Tegan, do you know?
I'm not sure off the top of my head. Let us try to check. My apologies.
Okay. So while Tegan's checking, Steve Olenoff.
So following up on what I said, I'd like to make a motion to include the Canton interchange. Given what's been said, I'm not sure whether I should include the red blue connector because we don't really have enough information on the cost, but just for now, I'll just say I'll make a motion to include the Canton interchange in the first 5 years, because that project is designed and ready to go.
First 5 years?
Right.
That would mean we'd have to amend the tip at some point to take projects out to put the Canton interchange in.
Well,
you do what you want, but
yes, we've always recognized that if MassDOT found the money for this, you'd have to amend both the long range transportation plan and the tip. But this project was designed as one project, and when there's an underbid in this for the Springfield Viaduct by about 40 million, that 40 million was very nicely provided to the Dedham Street corridor part of the Canton interchange project. That got started right away. And it was, that was all part of the design. So that's proof that this project is ready to go. It's been designed. I've seen the plans. I've been out in the field and arguing about little minor things like, should a trail connection go here or 50 feet over there? It's designed, and it's technically at 25%, but it's really at 100%. They just held it back because they didn't want permits to expire. So it's ready to go in the first 5 years.
Right,
So my motion is first 5 years.
all right, so there's a motion to add the Canton interchange project to the first time ban. Is there a second? Brian Kane,
I second that motion.
motion ever made and seconded. Is there discussion? Please call the roll.
David Moeller,
No.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, no.
John Romano,
John Romano, no.
Ally Clayman.
Ally Clayman, no.
I believe we still don't have Eric Barassa. Brian Kane,
Brian Kane, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, no.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitzgerald, no.
Eric Molinari,
Eric Molinari, no.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, no.
Rob King,
Rob King, no.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, no.
Kristen Guichard,
Kristen Guichard, no.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Dylan Lukich,
Dylan Lukich, abstain.
and Steve Olenoff.
Steve Olenoff, yes.
All right, that motion does not carry, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Before I call on other people, Tegan?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thanks for your patience. The issue that we were having determining the 2/3 or 1/2 vote is that the MOU states that votes of the Boston Region MPO and all certification documents and amendments to those documents shall be a 2/3 majority vote of those present and voting, provided that there's a quorum. So if this is interpreted as a vote on the certification document itself, then it would be 2/3. But if all other votes are only by majority. So if this is being viewed as only a portion of that document, so I'm not sure if there's precedent, Mr.
Right,
Chair.
so I'm going to make a ruling from the chair, and then if anybody wants to dispute it, we can discuss it and figure it out. I don't think this is a 2/3 vote. I don't think this is a vote on a certification document, nor is it an amendment to a certification document. It was an amendment to a staff recommendation related to a certification document, but I don't think it's within what was intended or implicated by the 2/3 requirement. So the ruling of the chair is that motion passed, but if anybody wants to object or have a discussion about we should apply the 2/3, please raise your hand now because we will certainly have that discussion. Seeing none, the previous motion to include Lexington and Framingham has passed. Are there other motions that anyone would like to make on the project list? Seeing none, the next issue Bradley would like us to discuss, I believe, is the investment program structure. Is that about adding the 2 new programs, Bradley?
Mr. Chair, if I may, on the projects, does that mean including the 6 projects that staff has identified required as well as the
Yeah,
2
that was
additional
part of
projects?
Dennis's motion was those 6 plus the 2 new.
Okay, yeah. So then the next question was, so there are 2 remaining questions. One about the structure of investment programs, which is shown on the slide right now. Would the members like to add a bike share program as recommended? And would members like to broaden the transit modernization program into a transit transformation program? And then the final question would be the percentage of funding to allocate to each program.
Yep, so let's take the first one first because you can't really allocate funding until you know which programs are. Is there discussion about whether we should add a bike share program and or a motion to add a bike share program as the case may be? Lynn Diggins.
I apologize for all the background sound, Mr. Chair. So I support the investment program structure primarily because I do like the allocations. So that'll, I'll keep it short and leave it there. Thank you.
Right. Okay. Is there? So I want to take these in 2 different ways because after discussion might want to vote different ways on them. Does anybody want to make a motion to add the bike share program? Jim Fitzgerald.
I'll make a motion to add the bike share program.
Lynn Diggins.
I'll second that. Thank you.
And Bradley, define the bike share program again for me so I can know how to vote. Please.
So the proposed program would add a new investment program so that the MPO could have funding specifically for bike share programs. Currently, some of that, and other people on the call can correct me, but currently bike share is funded either through the Community Connections program or through funding that has not yet been assigned to an investment program.
All right, and is this, that's one more question. Is this new or maintenance or both?
So I believe that the investment program could cover either depending on the funding sources used for different projects.
Okay, one last question. Is bike share no longer part of Community Connections? If we adopt this, is there a second program and people who want to do bike share go to the bike share program, but not the Community Connection program?
I think that was the proposal. So that there'd be a specifically identified investment program for bike share separate from Community Connections.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Please call the roll.
David Muller,
Sure, yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Ellie Clayman,
Ellie Clayman, yes.
Brian Kane,
Sure. Yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Yes. I think it's yes.
okay, Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Eric Molinari,
Eric Molinari, yes.
David Kosis,
David Kozis, yes.
Rob King,
Rob King, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Kristen Guichard,
Kristen Guichard, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Dylan Lukich,
Dylan Luckett, yes.
and Steve Olenoff.
Steve Olenoff, yes.
Great, motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Now, Bradley, explain to me what the second bullet means. What's it mean to change something from transit modernization to transit transformation?
So staff laid out some brief recommendations in a memo a month or so ago, suggesting what additional investments the MPO could make in transit if they so chose. The transit modernization program as it exists right now is intended for station improvements such as the Lynn station improvement that's in the current TIP. Over the past year, staff had conducted workshops with MPO members and sought other feedback on potential changes to investment programs. And one idea was to increase the scope of projects that the MPO might invest in transit. And the idea would be to create sort of a middle ground where projects that are larger than the community connections program but smaller than the major infrastructure program. So projects that are greater than $500,000 or so, but less than 50 million. And so it would give the MPO more opportunities to play a good role in transit other than just the station modernization type of projects that were funded under transit modernization. If the MPO wanted to make this change and broaden the program, then staff in coming months could flesh out the details on that and to create more of a process for determining which projects might be eligible under that program.
Thank you, Bradley. Is there a motion to broaden the transit modernization program into a transit transformation program? Brian Kane,
I'll move it.
is there a second?
Second, taking seconds.
Call the roll, please.
David Muller,
No.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, no.
John Romano,
John Romano, no.
Ally Clayman,
Ally Clayman, no.
Brian Kane,
Kane, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Eric Molinari,
Eric Molinari, yes.
Yeah.
David Kosis,
David Kozis, yes.
Rob King,
Rob King, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Kristen Guichard,
Kristen Guichard, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Dylan Lukich,
Dylan Luckett, yes.
and Steve Olenoff.
Steve Olenoff, yes.
That motion carries. Thank you very much. So now we've added those two programs. Now we're going to the program allocation. So this is the list as currently allocated or as staff recommends, assuming that we would adopt these last two things, which we did. So that's good. Comments, questions for Bradley? So Bradley, I have one, just to make sure. Has anybody done the math to make sure that we're still within our 30% major infrastructure, having added $165 million worth of projects to the second band?
So I think that would depend in part on the projects that we mentioned in the previous presentation at Rutherford Avenue and McGrath Boulevard. Those projects currently are funding programmed in the 24-28 TIP. I think there could be the possibility for the MPO to consider additional funding for those projects in the second time band from 29 to 33. But the projects in Framingham and Lexington would be drawing from the same pool of money, I believe.
Right, but we know how much money we're going to pay for Rutherford Avenue and McGrath in the second time band, right? The TIP has a project cost and it has how much is funded. So it's a simple math problem, right? Can somebody just do, not necessarily you, Bradley, because you're in the middle of doing the presentation, but can somebody add it up and tell me if it's 30% or less or more than what is available in the 5-year time band? Because I don't think we should, personally, I don't think we should do this if we're going to bust if we've already taken a vote that busts the major infrastructure 30% rule. I don't think we should vote for a 30% rule, but somebody needs to do some math. Brian Kane.
Thank you, David. Request, I guess, of you as chair. At some point, can we, as a MPO, take a step back and do a little, I don't know, fundamental stuff? I mean, I know staff does this and I get it, but we're often asked to make these decisions disconnected from what from lots of other stuff. And I would just like to better understand how everything connects together. And I would like us to have a discussion about values or priorities or whatever you want to call it. Now, I understand that we're being asked to put dollars here, and I get it, and we have to do it, and we always have a gun to our head, metaphorically speaking. But I guess my request to you is, at some point, sometime, can we just step back and think about this more holistically from like a 50,000-foot level instead of from a project level? Thank you.
So I think the answer to that is absolutely, Brian. I'm not sure when, but absolutely. David Kozis.
All right, so I think I asked the same question once before, but it feels like, the transit transformation 5%. These still seem like there could be really big ticket items, right? Last time we sort of said that a lot of details need to be worked out. We're not sure what this 5%, like what kind of projects we're talking about, but 5% compared to the community connections of 2%, right? Which are much, much smaller projects. Can we just make sure that we agree that these percentages make sense compared to each other?
We can try. Jim Fitzgerald.
So, on your question, Mr. Chair, about below and pass and major infrastructure, isn't McGrath now categorized as complete streets? And then I would if that's the case, I would ask the question about Rutherford, if that, like, how should that be considered complete streets?
That's an excellent question, Jim, and we'll let Bradley answer it. Bradley, define major infrastructure for us, please.
I'm sorry, I'm not the world's best expert on that question, but my understanding was that both the McGrath Boulevard and but McGrath and Rutherford projects were both classified as major infrastructure in this TIP. And so they would be competing for the same pool of funding as other major infrastructure projects potentially. And so my understanding to the math question earlier, I think if the funding that would continue beyond 2028 on Rutherford would be about 154 million out of, based on the estimates staff have of upcoming revenue, there could be about 250 million available in major infrastructure if it's 30% of all revenue. And the board also just voted for the Framingham project, which was $115 million in today's dollars.
Right. So based on my quick math, Rutherford is going to spend $154 million in the second time band. We just added, I think, $165 million in two projects in the second time band. You add those two up, that's $319 million. That's more than $250 million. We've already made decisions that say we're going to spend more than 30% of the LRTP on major infrastructure. So again, this is just me talking. I won't vote for this because we've already violated it, but that's just me. We need to get a motion to do something here, but I mean, I don't know what people want to do, but we clearly have overfunded major infrastructure in the second time band, and we're going to underfund something else, and maybe it'll all come out in the wash in the future time bands. I don't know, but I don't know what to do with this. Steve Olenoff.
So aren't these just targets? And if we don't meet it, there's some inconsistency. We can list the column we have here as targets, and then you could put the actual one, and why can't that be the plan, that this is what we'd hope for, this is what we actually did. Is that a possibility?
Sure, my recollection of these was that major infrastructure was actually a cap and everything else was a target. That we had made a policy decision in NPO that we were going to stop funding so much of major infrastructure so we could spread the money around more. But sure, they can be targets.
And given that, even though they're technically listed as major infrastructure, we really feel a large portion of them is complete streets. So that could be mentioned, and there's an explanation of why those targets weren't met.
Sure. We can explain away anything we want. Sure. Jim Fitzgerald.
Right, just to clarify, and maybe it's wrong, but I was just pulling my information because I had a recollection that I thought we at one point recategorized McGrath as complete streets, and then but table 2 in this LRTP projects attachment has it as complete streets. So I don't know what's right, but I guess I'm still wondering about my question of, are some of these really complete streets, or could they also be categorized that? Is there fluidity between the two? I would think yes. And
Yeah. So, and again, I have no clue, but my own bias is if you're spending $200 million on something, it's a major infrastructure project, right? If it's going to take 5 years and $200 million, I don't know how that's not in anybody's worldview a major infrastructure project, but that's just my bias. What, Lynn?
But it can be a major infrastructure project that has the other components in it, like transit transformation, and maybe even a complete element to it. Because that's how I kind of read the policy document regarding these new programs, especially the transit transformation. It's like there are some projects that have a big transit component in it, and so I guess it's a matter of whether a project is all or one. But look, the reason I'm fine with going ahead and approving this is based on early conversation where it's like, we can amend this, and as I said earlier, and I think Brian also wants to do this. It's like, let's have in-depth conversation on what we want to do in the next cycle, based on what's happening now. And I do take this process very seriously. I don't think it's farcical. I think it's just very hard. It's very complex, and we're all trying to work our way through it. And we'll do the best we can now, get this through, and amend as necessary, and develop a better process next cycle. Thank you.
Yep. So can I get a motion? Oh, wait, Eric, do you have a question or a comment?
I'll make a motion to adopt what is presented in front of us.
Thank you. Is there a second? Lynn Diggins.
I second it.
Please call the roll.
David Muller,
No.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, no.
John Romano,
John Romano, no.
Ally Clayman,
Ally Clayman, no.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Brian Kane,
Kane, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
I think it's yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Eric Molinari,
Eric Molinari, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
Rob King,
Rob King, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Kristen Guichard,
Kristen Guichard, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Dylan Lukich,
Dylan Lukich, yes.
and Steve Olenoff.
Steve Olenoff, yes.
Motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank everybody. That was a lot of very good discussion. Thank you so much and good job, staff. Next item on the agenda is TIP development, CIP update, highway and transit project selection. Michelle Scott, who you will note works not for the MPO anymore, but for MassDOT, and Jillian Yanell. So I think it's Michelle first.
Everyone, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and hello, everyone. My name is Michelle Scott. I'm the manager of capital planning at the MassDOT's Office of Transportation Planning. And today I'm going to be talking briefly about our 24 to 28 capital investment plan, or CIP for short. Next slide, please. So here are a couple of topics that I plan to cover. First is some information about what the CIP is and the framework that's used to put it together, its relationship to the State Transportation Improvement, or STIP, strategic goals that inform the development of the CIP, and things that are relatively new for the 24 to 28 cycle, preliminary funding sources that will support the CIP, some information about our development schedule, and finally close out with some details about public engagement. Next slide, please. So the CIP is a financially constrained investment plan that programs federal and state funds to pay for the Commonwealth's capital expenditures related to transportation. Like the TIP, this is our rolling 5-year plan that we update every year. It encompasses a wide variety of transportation infrastructure types, ranging from roadways, bridges, bicycle and pedestrian, and transit, things that are typically reflected in TIPs, as well as investments for rail, aeronautics, and for the registry of motor vehicles. The diagram on the right-hand side of the slide explains the overall framework that undergirds the CIP. You can see up at the top the 3 major priorities: reliability, modernization, and expansion, which go on to inform the structure and the size of investment programs designed to advance these priorities. And within these investment programs are funded individual projects. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the CIP is closely related to the State Transportation Improvement Program, which is the 5-year plan that encompasses the federally funded transportation investments for highway and transit. As you may know, these are made up, or the STIP is made up of the TIPs that are produced by the MPOs and the transportation planning organizations, or TPOs, throughout the Commonwealth. The STIP is a compilation of all of them and reflects funding from, or projects funded by MPO discretionary dollars, MassDOT dollars, and transit agency dollars. So the diagram on the right highlights kind of the relationship, which is basically that the STIP is a component of the overall CIP. So as noted there, the STIP is expected to comprise about 10.8 billion within an overall CIP of about 14.9 billion based on the information we have today. However, both plans kind of use that same organizing framework based on those reliability, modernization, and expansion priorities. Next slide, please. So this slide highlights some of the funding sources that go to pay for the transportation investments accounted for in the CIP. There's, of course, various types of federal funding from the various US DOT administrations. These include regular formula funds that we receive consistently over time. Should MassDOT be awarded funding from one of the discretionary programs, of which there are many now under the bipartisan infrastructure law, those awards will be accounted for in the CIP. In addition to this federal funding, there's state funding, including the bond cap investments. These funds come often to match the federal dollars that we receive. There's also other types of bonding for particular transportation initiatives. CIP is also funded by tolls, which go to pay for projects on the facilities where those tolls are collected, as well as a variety of other sources. Next slide, please. So again, talking more about the strategic framework specifically for 2024 to 28, we mentioned those underlying priorities. Another major influence on our upcoming CIP, of course, as in recent years, is the bipartisan infrastructure law. And this includes some of the new federal programs that are established under the bipartisan infrastructure law, including the PROTECT program, which is designed to fund transportation investments to improve resiliency, the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, for which MassDOT has developed an implementation plan, as well as the Carbon Reduction Program. And MassDOT is currently working on a strategy for spending those federal dollars to that program on specific projects in coordination with the Executive Office for Climate and the Executive Office for Energy and Environmental Affairs. Next slide, please. So interrelated with the influence from the BIL and that underlying priority structure are 4 strategic goals for the CIP. They include safety, which of course includes implementing provisions of MassDOT's recently adopted strategic highway safety plan, climate stewardship, which includes both decarbonization and transportation resiliency elements, equity, and that accounts not only for the specific investments included in the CIP, but the way we engage stakeholders in the public in determining the CIP's development. And finally, responsible asset management, which is focused on preserving and modernizing transportation assets to achieve the Commonwealth's performance goals. Next slide, please. So how do all of these factors come together, and what does their influence look like in our upcoming CIP? Well, some changes that we're seeing for 24 through 28 include proposed new CIP investment programs, one of them being a resiliency improvements program that will direct that federal protect funding and matching funding to specific investments to protect vulnerable assets from things like extreme weather and sea level rise. Another change is that the Safe Routes to School program is now a standalone item in the CIP. In previous years, infrastructure investments for Safe Routes to School had been part of the roadway reconstruction program, and now they're a standalone item. Next slide, please. Other factors, I spoke about those 3 new federal funding programs. In terms of carbon reduction funding, while the outlines of that strategy are still being developed, we're likely to see increased funding in areas for multimodal projects, such as those funded through the Complete Streets program, increased emphasis on transit infrastructure investments, such as electric vehicles for the Commonwealth's RTAs, as well as implementation of that National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure, or NEVI plan. Now, there continues to be ongoing increased support for bridge investments throughout the Commonwealth, as well as programming of increased funding to support improved transit infrastructure for seniors and people with disabilities. Another factor that we're seeing for this particular CIP is an estimated increase in toll revenues. This is in part due to the rebounding of traffic after that initial decrease seen at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. Next slide, please. So this slide kind of highlights the sources of spending for the CIP. There's a comparison between the spending for the 23 through 27 CIP, which is the one where is in effect right now, and our development CIP for 24 through 28. Overall, as you can see, that will be approximately a $14.9 billion plan. There are the different colored bars in that chart show the relative size of the sources of funding in the CIP. As you can see, the largest is the federal funding. It's shown in blue. That makes up about 40% of the overall spending, followed by state funding, which makes up about another 38%. As noted on the slide, this does include some MassDOT and MBTA spending. This is specifically for a limited amount of funding that comes across the Commonwealth's books for things like South Coast Rail, new red and orange line cars, and bi-level commuter rail coaches. But of course, this MBTA develops an independent capital investment plan, and you'll be hearing more about that shortly. Next slide, please. So just to talk a little bit about our overall development process, really the high activity period for the CIP in a particular development year runs from approximately December through June. Early phases involve OTP staff working with MassDOT's divisions on requests for new projects, understanding expected spending and available funding, and starting to work on sizing those investment programs that I referenced. The process for prioritizing projects, which happens in late winter and early spring, is informed by project assessment and scoring activities, and in particular by the readiness status exercise that you all are familiar with from developing the TIP. In the spring, program sizing is finalized and project lists are developed. And as I mentioned earlier, the TIPs from the various MPOs in the Commonwealth make up an important component of those overall project lists. In April, MassDOT finishes creating a draft site CIP. And in May, the MassDOT Board of Directors reviews this draft and approves its release. We hope for a 21-day public comment period. During that comment period, we host a series of public engagement events, which I'll talk more about in a minute, and also conduct an equity analysis of the selected investments. And then in June, we bring back public comments received on the CIP and the results of that equity analysis for the board of directors to review, for them to take a vote later that month, hopefully to approve a final CIP that will go into effect in July. Next slide, please. So this is a slightly different version of that timeline, which is really meant to show the interrelationship between activities to develop the CIP and activities to develop the STIP. So you can see that CIP program sizing activities and financial planning in the beginning go on to inform preliminary activities to develop the STIP. In the late winter and early spring, there's a lot of interaction and coordinated activity between these two documents as more readiness and project detail information is being collected and prioritized. And then, as you'll see in April, May, and June, content that is finalized for the MPO's tips and the STIP overall goes on to influence a major portion of the final content in the final CIP. Next slide, please. So just to talk a little bit more about our upcoming public engagement, as I mentioned, we hope that the MassDOT Board of Directors will vote to approve a draft CIP for release at their May 17th board meeting. Our expected public comment period will be from May 18th through June 9th. And during this period, there are a couple of different ways that folks can provide comment. These include emailing MassDOT or writing a letter, providing comments on our interactive CIP online comment tool, which shows the different projects that are expected to be included, or by attending a virtual public meeting. We're planning 6 of these events that'll include all have kind of the same general content about the CIP, but then also some specific regional highlights. And we're planning a meeting specifically about the Boston region coming up on May 30th, and appreciate the MPO staff support in putting that together. And as part of course, looking at public comments for the CIP, we do review public feedback that's submitted on the tip as discussed at some of your upcoming MPO meetings. So as I mentioned, this comment period will close on June 9th, and we hope to discuss these comments and achieve final board approval for the CIP from the directors at their meeting on June 21st. Next slide, please. So just a quick snapshot of the CIP's online comment tool. This is designed to help people kind of explore the content of the CIP, where projects are located, and provide people the opportunity to provide comment on specific projects using this interface. So, we definitely look forward to, hearing more from folks about this upcoming CIP. And at this point, I'll turn it back over to the chair for other parts of the presentation. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Michelle. So David Muller has left us again, so I'm stepping up as chair. Any questions for Michelle? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Do I pass it to Jillian now? Are you up? I think so.
I believe so.
Great. Go
All
ahead,
right.
Jillian. Thank you.
All right, so good afternoon, everyone. I am going to, for the sake of time, I am going to move very quickly through this presentation. I will, however, just at the top of my presentation, note that we have presented to the MBTA board, which does record all of their presentations. So any of the content here, most of the content here is available online, but I'm going to move rapid for everyone's sake. So as hopefully most of you know at this point, my name is Jillian Linnell. I'm the Senior Director of Capital Program Planning at the MBTA. I'm going to quickly cover today the MBTA's capital investment plan, and I have a couple slides just on the TIP and the TIP amendment that you guys have already reviewed and already voted to release for public comment. So next slide, please. All right, so I think as everyone knows, and as Michelle just covered, the CIP is our short-term financially constrained investment program that includes all of our capital expenses for the next 5 years. It's a rolling plan. We update it every year. Next slide, please. I won't go into detail here, but just setting the stage, this is the high-level look at the MBTA system. I'm going to assume most people here know most of these details, but it is a good reference point to get us started. So next slide, please. Again, still some recap, but over the last 5 to 7 years, the MBTA has dramatically increased our overall capital spend, and we continue to sustain an unprecedented level of investment that is focused on the safety of our system, the modernization of our assets, and the strategic expansion of our network. Highlighted on this slide on the left-hand side are some key milestones from capital projects that have wrapped up or completed in the last 2 years. Next slide, please. Turning to the development of this proposed 24 to 28 CIP, the agency focused on a number of key policy objectives that are outlined here and that are covered in a bit more detail later in the deck. The first is the prioritizing of safety and reliability investments. Second is building toward enhanced and improved system accessibility. And then third is promoting system sustainability and resiliency. Next slide, please. Great. So consistent with previous years, the MBTA does undertake a 6-step process to develop and update our CIP as outlined here. This process did not fundamentally change this year from last year. So I'm actually, if everyone's okay with that, I am going to move quickly to the next slide because I believe I've presented this a couple of years in a row now. Also, as everyone knows, and as Michelle just covered, the CIP is a priority-driven investment strategy that is broken out into priorities and programs. The highest level, as we know, is the priority, and for the MBTA, it's actually divided into 2 distinct programs. The first is reliability and modernization combined, which focus on investments that improve the safety and reliability of our system and the modernization of our existing assets. And then the second priority is expansion, which includes the targeted investments to increase system capacity or multimodal options. Underneath both of these priorities are the 10 CIP programs, which are all outlined here on this slide, and which include all of the projects in the CIP are sorted into one of these CIP programs. Next slide, please. So there are 4 primary categories of sources that the MBTA receives to support the capital program, and they're all outlined here. So starting on the left-hand side of the slide with federal funds, as I'm sure the MPO is aware, the MBTA receives formula funding through 3 programs administered by the Federal Transit Administration. They are the 5307 program or the Urbanized Area Program, the Section 5339 program or the Bus and Bus Facilities program, and the Section 5337 program or the State of Good Repair program. In addition, the MBTA is eligible and often awarded competitive funding grants from a range of federal agencies, including USDOT, FTA, and FRA. And once those awards are received, those funds are reflected as sources in the CIP. Moving to state sources, the MBTA currently receives state funding as either Commonwealth Rail Enhancement Bonds or Commonwealth General Obligation Bond Proceeds or Bond Cap. These primarily support specific projects such as South Coast Rail Phase 1, GLX, the Red Line, Orange Line Vehicles and Infrastructure Improvements Project, and the procurement of bi-level commuter rail coaches. Moving on down the slide to the MBTA sources, there are a number of different subcategories. To start, the MBTA issues bonds to support the CIP. These include taxable, tax-exempt, and sustainability bonds, which are made available annually. The second component of our MBTA sources are Build America Bureau loans, which the MBTA can pursue to support large federally eligible capital projects. There are 2 programs, TIFIA and RIF, which are both reflected in the TIP. And both of these offer, as I mentioned, loans to the MBTA to finance both railroad and transit infrastructure. There are 2 more MBTA sources. First are operating budget transfers, which are funds that pass through from the MBTA's operating budget to the capital program. And then finally, there is the Capital Maintenance Fund, which is a limited fund held by the authority that may be used at the discretion of the CFO. Finally, the MBTA does also receive reimbursable sources or funding from outside sources that are established through partnerships or formal agreements to complete a specific scope of work. Next slide, please. So just one quick moment on federal discretionary grants, discretionary funds, because I know this is often a topic of great interest for folks. As we know in the bipartisan infrastructure law, which was signed in November of 2021, there are 2 main channels with which the MBTA can receive federal funding. It is through the formula programs or the discretionary or competitive grant programs. Under the BIL, the amount of funding available through the discretionary channels was significantly increased. And so in response to this, the MBTA did stand up a new group dedicated to the pursuit of these discretionary funds. This team focuses on identifying the grant opportunities, maintaining a pipeline of competitive projects, and the development and submission of strong applications. The MBTA continues to focus on seeking funds for projects that align with our stated goals, our strategic mission, and our 5-year CIP, which remains the MBTA statement of priorities for our capital investments. We continue to use the annual CIP development process to establish the pool of projects for which we may develop discretionary grant applications. However, it's only after a grant is awarded that the funds are then reflected in the CIP and the TIP. To date, we've aggressively pursued nearly all eligible federal discretionary grant funding opportunities. And in federal fiscal years 22 and 23, we were able to bring in nearly $250 million in discretionary grant funding. Next slide, please. Shifting back to the proposed 24 to 28 CIP, this program is currently programmed to reflect $9.2 billion in sources shown here, broken out by the main source categories that I already covered. Regarding the specific source assumptions that are used to build our capital plan, starting now at the top with reimbursable sources, our assumptions are tied specifically to uses and our existing partnerships and agreements. Within state sources, these numbers continue to include the sources that are programmed for specific projects that I previously covered. And this year, we are also reflecting the $116 million in funding from Mass Track that supports the local match for additional federal funding the MBTA receives under bill. Regarding the MBTA sources, this includes an annual issuance of $590 million a year, our existing USDOT loans, and an annual operating transfer of $60 million for each year in the 5-year CIP. And then finally, our federal sources reflect the federal funding levels included under bill, discretionary grant awards the agency has received, and federal funding the agency has received for GLX. Next slide, please. So looking at the projects that are actually included in the 5-year plan, as it is currently drafted, it includes 600 capital projects representing $9.2 billion in spend, with projects being executed by 30 MBTA departments. Reliability and modernization investments account for the majority of the planned and underway investments, representing $8.7 billion. There are also 10 expansion projects still within the CIP, representing just over $500 million of programmed spend. Also included on this slide, on the right-hand side are the top 15 projects as defined by fiscal year 24 to 28 projected spend. Many of these are already known projects, so I'm just going to move on and trust that everyone can check out the slide if they're interested. So next slide, please. So this slide quickly highlights the program sizes associated with the proposed 24 to 28 CIP. These program sizes are largely proportional to the 23 to 27 CIP, which continue to focus on critical guideway signal and power investments, vehicle improvements, and maintenance and administrative facility improvements. Next slide, please. Looking just at new funding in the CIP, this year we added just under $1 billion total in new funding that was programmed across the 5-year CIP window. This includes existing projects that have received additional funding and also new projects. A total of 78 projects received new or additional funding, with 43 of those being new projects to the MBTA's overall capital plan. In the bottom left-hand side of this slide, you can see the breakdown of new and existing funding by CIP program. And then on the right-hand side, this list shows the top 25 safety-related projects receiving new funding. Next slide, please. So the next couple of slides, I'm actually just going to go through, I'm going to pretty much skip, but highlight the 3 thematic priority areas that I identified at the top of this presentation and highlight some of the key investments in the capital plan that support those overall objectives. So this one is focused on prioritizing safety and reliability. If we could go to the next slide. This one focuses on enhancing and improving our system accessibility. And then finally, the next slide, please, focuses on sustainability and resiliency. Next slide, please. I will take a quick moment and highlight some of the key efforts the agency is advancing to support the electrification of both our bus and commuter rail network. On the bus side, as highlighted on this slide, the CIP includes investments which support the MBTA's bus electrification strategy. Specifically, it includes key investments like the procurement of battery electric buses to initiate the conversion of our fleet to zero emission technology, and also the modernization of 3 bus facilities, Quincy, North Cambridge, and Arbor Way, to support these new fleets. On the commuter rail side, we are continuing to invest in the first phase of regional rail transformation as defined by the FMCB in 2019. The CIP includes planning and studies to help inform the implementation of rail transformation, initial planning support for the procurement of future fleet to deliver electrified rail service, and an immediate focus on no regrets investments, which will provide benefits to the customers regardless of the fleet or power technology that is ultimately chosen. Next slide, please. So to support the rollout of the proposed 24 to 28 CIP, we developed and have released a standalone MBTA CIP book that is available on the MBTA's website. The document structure has 4 major components, which are outlined here on the right-hand side and provide a lot of details about how we develop the plan, the inputs, and then break it out into a number of different sections. The 4th section, as detailed here, is the full project list. That includes the project description, phase, primary mode, planned 5-year spend, total authorized budget. And within this list of all the projects in our CIP, we do also note which ones received new funding in this cycle. Next slide, please. So to accompany the CIP document, we are also inviting public engagement and comment through multiple channels. We have at this point already held, there are 3 public meetings, but we also are encouraging folks to share their comments using our online public comment tool, and are also accepting comments via emails or letters. And I will note that our public comment period is scheduled to wrap up on Monday, April 24th. But we do encourage anyone who is interested to please provide feedback. We will be reviewing that. If we could go to the next slide, please. We will be closing our public comment period and wrapping up our CIP in advance of returning to the May MBTA subcommittee and board meetings with a final CIP for vote for approval. I have a couple more slides just on the tip, but I'm going to go very quickly. So if we could just go to the next one, please. Thank you. So this is, I believe, already covered in a bit of detail. So I don't want, and I will note that the tip tables, including the supporting project list, have been published on the MPO's website. But as drafted, the fiscal year 23 to 24 tip amendment and fiscal year 24 to 28 tip include 89 projects funded using FTA formula funds. As shown in the graph on this slide, the largest formula funding programs are stations and facilities, followed by revenue vehicles and bridge and tunnel. And then on the right-hand side of the slide, we are showing the program tip amounts by mode. I do want to note that while the CIP and tip do speak to each other, the CIP programmed federal funding does not exactly equal the tipped program funding. And I just want to make sure folks aren't trying to compare the numbers exactly. As a reminder, the TIP represents planned obligations and the MBTA CIP represents projected cash flows. However, it is the same scope of projects. Moving to the next slide, please. So looking just at formula funds, a total of 3.02 billion in FTA formula funds are programmed across the 6 years. This includes funding for projects that were already included on the tip, but also 13 new projects, a couple of which are highlighted here on this slide, but that also were noted as such in the accompanying tip tables that were made available. Next slide, please. As I already mentioned, the tip now reflects substantial funding from federal discretionary grant awards. This actually, right now it reflects 9 grant awards totaling $218.7 million in federal funding. And again, some of the more notable awards or more recent awards are included here on this slide. Next slide, please. And then finally, consistent with last year, you will see on our tip projects that may potentially be funded by federal RIF and TIFIA loans. As I noted, the MBTA continues to explore the use of federal loans through the Build America Bureau to finance certain capital projects at a low interest rate. These projects are included on the tip for information purposes and are subject to the approval of funding through the CIP process. And if/when additional federal loan funds are utilized, similar to how we have accessed these loans for the PTC, ATC, and fiber resiliency projects, additional information will then be provided through future tips or tip amendments. But I do just want to know that these are included on the tip currently. All right, with that, I will wrap up my presentation. I am happy to take any questions. But that is it for now.
Thank you, Jillian, and great job to the MBTA for getting over $200 million of discretionary grants in the past year. So that's exciting.
Very exciting. Thanks.
Any questions for Jillian? Brian Kane.
Thanks, Eric. Just to say that the advisory board is doing its usual deep dive on this, and it's great that one of the things that's clear is the investments the authority is making in safety and reliability, which I think we can all agree should be its top priority and should be our top priority, frankly. So kudos to that. And again, Jillian, thank you for presenting to the advisory board, and look forward to continuing to work with you.
Thanks, Brian.
Great. So unless there are any other questions, not seeing any, Jillian, great job. Thank you. We can move on to the next agenda item, which is members items. Are there any members items today? I am not seeing any. So let's get a motion and a second to adjourn and give some folks time before UPWP. Brian Kane.
Move to adjourn.
Can I have a second?
Taking seconds.
Excellent. Just a reminder, folks, we have a UPWP meeting, I believe at 1:15 we're starting it. And thank you everyone for a great meeting today. Without exception, we are adjourned. Thank you all. Take care.